Whenever you're ready to drift off, let your breath slow and your shoulders soften. Tonight, let's quietly explore for gentle corners of the past. We'll begin beside the Nile at first light, where linen meets clear water, and a handful of natron turns the current silky. We'll visit a relay post on the steppe at dusk, where a fresh horse and a ladle of hot tea carry messages onward. We'll sit at a low-lacquered table in Edo, where a cracked bowl earns a golden seam and returns to service with quiet dignity. And we'll end in an Ottoman coffeehouse at closing. When porcelain is rinsed, lamps are pinched, and the door lifts into its hook as you settle in for the night. Know that the pace will be slow and sleep safe. Simple words, soft detail, nothing sudden, only steady motions, small tools, and friendly sounds. Water on stone, leather over wood, a brush that breathes on gold, a brazier that ticks as it cools. If your mind feels ready, we'll begin where river light trembles on fabric and reeds make a border for the day. Here, work is measured in folds and rinses, in squares of sun on a reed mat, in the sound linen makes when it drinks the morning. Before the sun climbs the pond tops, the river is already awake. Its surface is a sheet of pale gray glass, broken only by small ripples where a fish takes air or a stick drifts. On the near bank, the clay is firm and cool. The first footsteps leave clean ovals, then fill slowly with water as the skin of the mud remembers its softness. A woman arrives with a basket balanced on her head and a jar tucked in the crook of her elbow. The basket smells faintly of date leaves and clean dust. The jar is stopped with twisted cloth. Inside rests natron mineral salt that looks like crushed chalk. She lowers the basket with two careful hands. The woven rim lands on the bank with a short, hollow thrum. In the basket lie folded linen pieces, a bone comb, a small wooden beater, and a lump of blue clay wrapped in worn linen for fine brightening later. There is also a flat stone smoothed from years of ponds and water, ready to be set into the shallows. She greets the river as one greets a house, not loudly, but as if entering. The air smells of wet reed and warm silt. Somewhere behind, a sleepy ibis clears its throat. Farther out, a crocodile's ripple is nothing more than a crease of shadow slipping toward the far reeds. There will be no haste here. Work comes in long, friendly lines. Today, like yesterday, like most days, the water is generous. She spreads a reed mat at the edge of the bank, anchoring the corners with rounded stones. The mat fibers are sun-polished and slightly sweet to the nose. When the light grows, this mat will hold a square of brightness large enough to dry a tunic. She sets the flat washing stone into the shallows, a hand span below the surface, so the water slides over it in a thin, smooth skin. The stone is the size of a small tray and has a dent where the heel of a hand likes to rest. From the jar, she pinches out natron just enough to turn the river into a soft hand. It drops like quiet snow into the current and dissolves to a pale cloud that travels and fades. The water feels different now, a touch more slippery, the way fresh water learns to behave when it holds salt and sun together. This may seem unusual today, but in her time, natron serves many small kindnesses. It cleans linen, dries fruit, and keeps the dead from slipping too quickly back to dust. Here, it simply helps a hem remember white. The first garment is a household tunic, woven from flax that once grew in narrow, thirsty rows not far from the flood line. The linen is light and open in the weave, good for heat and for air. She lays it across the stone so the current pushes through it. Hands spread, fingers straight. She works the cloth from shoulder to hem. Palms press, lift, press again, always in the same rhythm. The river does the rinsing, she gives it the reason. When a spot needs more asking, she lifts the wooden beater. It is a simple stick with one broad face rubbed smooth by years of water and use. She taps along the hem and the edges of the sleeves, not hard, not fast, just enough to wake the fibers and move the silk that cloth collects from walls, floors, and bodies. Tapping makes a soft, hollow sound like knocking gently on a door that you already know is open. Between taps, she uses the bone comb to tease out fringes and straighten the narrow band at the neck. The comb's teeth are fine and a little uneven. They catch, release, catch again. Under the water, the comb whispers like reeds in light wind. A loose thread is worked back with the comb's spine and smoothed with a thumb. Another woman arrives, then a third, each with her basket, her tools, her modest jokes for the morning. They greet with a nod. It is too early for much talk, and the river carries words away quickly anyway. A child trails behind the second woman, both curious and not yet needed. He is handed a small task. Keep the reed mat lying flat, brush sand off the corner stones when they collect grit, chase a stray chicken if it thinks to come down to drink where the linen lies. He is also trusted with the blue clay bundle, which he sets, proud and careful, on the dry part of the mat. By habit, they set aside the better tunics to boo later, the ones that will be worn in the town when the sun is low and the air is kinder. Blue clay will give them a whisper of brightness, a soft correction for the faint yellow that linen adopts with age. For now, the morning belongs to washing in first sunlight. Between rinses, the women shift their feet to keep the bank from growing slick. Sandals are left on dry ground. Feet learn quickly where the bottom holds and where it offers a surprise. The current is polite today, neither too slow nor too eager. Upstream, someone has already drawn water in jars for their house. The ripples of that work arrive as small echoes. Now the larger pieces come out: a sheet, a longer robe, a linen towel. 2 pairs of hands take each end. Together they lift, lower, lift again, and watch the water check each fold. When the sheet is ready, they carry it dripping to the mat. Arms wide, they let it settle so the warped threads sit true. They smooth from center to edge with flat palms, pushing bubbles of water toward the corners. The square of sun on the mat is still small, but it grows by finger widths as the minutes pass. They pause and eat. Bread from yesterday barley, a little coarse, still sweet, has been wrapped in cloth to keep the dust off. Dates lie in a small basket, and a pinch of salt in a lidded cup sits ready for the tongue's memory. Eating here is quiet, not a break from work, but a part of it. The mouth works, the hands rest, the eyes watch for the way light changes the color of wet linen. The child gets a date with a split stone, 2 halves opening like a tiny book. He holds it up to the sun to see the ember light pass through. A passing boat glides close enough that its wake reaches the bank. It is a low craft carrying jars and a clay amphora plugged with waxed cloth. The man at the stern nods. The small wave lifts the sheet a little, flutters the edge. The women press it back into place with easy, practiced hands. The river keeps its pace. The day keeps its promise of heat, but not yet. On a flat stone set slightly higher on the bank, a jar stands ready to receive the cleanest water for the final rinse. The woman fills it carefully, letting the first water wash the mouth of the jar so no stray grit rides inside. She tips in a thumb's worth of natron and swirls. Clear, then silvery, then clear again as the crystals vanish. A handful of linen strips, ties for hair, ties for small bundles will be swished in this last bath so they dry to a soft, friendly hand. She lifts the first tunic from the water and wrings it in a slow twist, not harshly, never wringing the neck where threads are close. She lets the river take the last beads of water from the hem and lays the cloth to rest on the edge of the mat, half in shade, half in sun, so the drying is even. A palm passes over it like a blessing. She presses the seams flat with the side of her hand and leaves her palms print in water that flashes and disappears. From time to time she glances toward the papyrus where the current runs a little faster. In later parts of the morning, when the sun is high and the water seems to slow, that fast strip will help finish the rinses without repeating the work of the beater. For now, dawn is still doing its part. The stone is cool under her fingers. The natron jar is light enough to need refilling tomorrow, but today it is enough. The child, having kept his mat corners and the blue clay bundle safe, asks if he may tap the beater once. He is given permission and instruction. Not here, not the edge of the neck, not over the seam here along the hand. Gentle, even, like a footfall you use when someone is sleeping. He taps. The sound is smaller than the woman's, but true. A breeze slides down the river. It lifts the hair at the nape of the neck, carries the green smell of wet reeds, moves the tiny hairs on the skin of the arms. It is a small mercy before the sun comes to claim the day. A lotus leaf turns in place and shows a brighter side. A frog startles and resigns itself to a new seat. The women roll their shoulders and let their breath fall into the work again. We will stay with them a while longer through bluing, through the careful shaking that saves a seam from creasing, through the slow folding and the small meal at midday. For now, the morning is still stretching. The river is still generous. The hands repeat what they know, and the linen becomes clean the way the day becomes bright by degrees, and without effort showing. The square of sun on the reed mat has widened to the size of a low table. The damp tunic lying there turns from a deep pearl to a milky white with a quiet patience. When the edges begin to lift like the corners of a page, the woman returns to it. She kneels, palms flat, and presses out the small waves that drying makes, guiding each ripple toward the mat's edge so the cloth forgets to wrinkle. From the basket she takes the blue clay bundle, the little parcel the child guarded. The cloth around it is stained here and there, proof of many mornings. She unties the soft knot and opens the linen to reveal the clay, the smooth lozenge the color of shallow sky. A bowl waits nearby with a finger's depth of clear river water. She rubs the clay gently against the inside of the bowl, turning the water the faintest gray blue like shade reflected in a wow. It is not paint and it is not dye, it is a polite hint of coolness that makes white seem whiter when the cloth is dry. This may seem unusual now, but people in many times have used a whisper of blue to make linen red as bright in the sun. She dips a folded cloth, one of the finer ones, into the blue water and lifts it slowly so the liquid sheets away in even lines. No rushing. If the blue rides in streaks, the eye will find the place and never forget it. She lets the cloth rest above the bowl for a breath, then lays it once, only once, across the washing stone so the current pulls through without disturbing the surface. It is enough. The cloth goes to a second mat that waits in gentler light. Palm smooth. Edges squared. The blue does not declare itself, it waits for later, when the cloth is fully dry and the ear tells truth. Another woman brings over a longer garment, its hem trimmed with a narrow band that will want attention if it is to hang properly. They bend over it together, not speaking, each taking an end of the hem. Between their fingers, the fabric makes a quiet, regular hiss as they slide it and press it straight. A tiny frayed thread is worried back into the weave with the tip of the bone comb. They measure without measuring, a palm's width here to thumb joints there, always the same places that a lifetime of work uses as rulers. Downriver, a group from a household with small children arrives late and sets up farther along the bank. There is more talk there, more laughter, more questions. Here, the rhythm is steadier. The child who guarded the blue clay now carries the beater to the water's edge and offers it to be wiped clean. He is given a strip of old linen to shine the beater's smooth face, and he takes his time, making small circles until the wood glows a shade darker from the thin coat of water and oil from many mornings. The first tunics are nearly dry. The woman lifts one by its shoulders and gives it a long, gentle shake that is more like a sigh than a snap. The sound carries along the river, a soft drum of wet threads agreeing to lie flat. She lays it back, but now half turned, so the back drinks the sun where the front has already had its share. She sets a rounded stone on the very edge of the hem, not heavy, just enough to say stay. The stone is warm now, and it leaves a faint circle that will fade as the cloth finishes. From a small jar, she pours a thin starch water made yesterday from crushed seeds. It looks like the river in miniature, cloudy at first, then clear when stirred. She dampens a clean strip of linen with it and wipes lightly along the neckband of a tunic. Not stiff, only tidy. In this place, white linen is a kind of greeting. People notice whether a garment lies calm at the neck and along the wrists. Temple linen must be quieter, still crisp at the edge, and troubled by crease. The same hands do all of it. Only the measure and the patience change. She returns to the washing stone and takes a heavier cloth, a working towel with a weave that shows its ridges like the bark of a young tree. She presses her palms into it, heel first, then fingers, letting the current speak through. Between presses, she keeps an eye on the sky. A strand of high cloud tells her how quickly the sun will warm the mat. A change in wind across the skin tells her whether to wait the corners or let them lift. It is a kind of reading, not of letters but of texture and light. A man from a nearby boat steps up from the shallows with 2 lengths of coarser linen sailcloth for patching, perhaps, and asks carefully if they might be rinsed clean enough to take pitch later. He sets down a small fee, a round loaf, a dab of oil in a lidded cup, and a handful of chickpeas. Payment for laundry can be in many forms: a pinch of salt, a piece of soap, a promise of help at harvest. She nods, for the day is kind, and there is time between tunics to spare a hand for rougher work. They rinse the sailcloth with the river doing most of the talking. No bluing here, no gentle beater, only the steady weight of water pressing through and the clean lift of the arms to carry away grit. When finished, they lay the cloth not on the fine mat but on a patch of clean sand at the higher bank where it will dry without asking for precision. The man thanks them with a low bow and leaves the loaf and oil, which they set aside under cloth so the river breeze will not tempt it to take dust. By now the first blued tunic is ready to check. The woman lifts it to eye height and turns it slightly. In shade it reads as simple white. In the slant of sun, there's a shy coolness that makes it look new again. She smiles, but only on the inside. The face stays as calm as the river's slow center. She folds the tunic in the way she always has, sleeves inward, hand to shoulder, then once more into a tidied brick that will sit well under the weight of the basket. She sets it aside and taps the child's shoulder to show him the faint blue that no one else will notice unless they are looking for it. A small break. The women sit with their legs drawn under and their backs easy. They share the round loaf that the boatman brought, dipping torn pieces into the little cup of oil. One offers dates from her own cloth pouch, another pours water into a shallow bowl so everyone's hands can be refreshed. The child eats chickpeas from his palm two at a time, and then remembers to chase a stray piece of broken reed away from the mat with his heel. Sated, they return to the work as if the river had asked. A dragonfly lands on the reed mat and cleans its face with quick forelegs. For a long breath, nothing moves except the light. Then the river reminds them. They rise and begin to turn the heavier pieces that have been drinking sun. The mat's woven pattern prints faintly into the cloth while it dries, a memory that will disappear with the first wearing. They tuck away the blue clay bundle again, still moist enough for tomorrow. Linen strips for tying sleeves are rolled and knotted in pairs, one knot always on the left, by habit. So a hand can find it in the dark. Before the sun reaches its highest, they will finish this first round and spread the second. Finer things and cloth for a neighbor with a new baby whose laundry smells of milk and sleep. But that is ahead. For now the current keeps its slow song, the stone stays cool under water, the natron jar, lighter than at dawn, still has enough for today. Work moves in circles here, wash, smooth blue, dry, fold, and each circle rests inside the larger one that is the river itself. By mid-morning the light has turned the river's surface to beaten metal where it runs wide. But here in the shallows it stays glassy and full of small secrets. Minnows test the shade under the washing stone. A feather from a heron drifts to the edge and catches on the reed roots. The women shift their cloths a hand's breadth toward the mat's cooler side, a motion so practiced it is almost part of breathing. One brings up the little reed brush, a tight bundle bound with cord, and sweeps the washing stone. Not to scour, only to ask the silt to go. The brush makes a low, friendly sound like a broom through seed husks. The stone is old, its top worn into a gentle hollow that knows the shape of a palm. Laundry stones varied, some were river-smooth boulders, some flat blocks brought to the bank. The important thing was a surface that would not bite the linen. When she lifts the brush, a wet silhouette remains for a moment, then vanishes. The child carries the natron jar closer to the water and taps the waxed plug with his knuckle. It makes a small drum note. He is allowed to weigh it in his hands to feel how much of the morning sits inside. The jar is lighter than at dawn, still there is plenty. Natron dries the skin a little, so a small pot of oil sits near to brighten the hands after long work. He watches the women and rubs a thumb across his other palm as they do, leaving a faint shine that smells of seeds and sun. They begin on the second round of washing. This pile is finer, narrow sleeves, a girdle cloth, a child's tunic edged with a fringe that tangles easily. One woman dips the fringe into the current and combs it with the bone comb teeth downward, letting the water do half the work. The comb makes no sound, but the movement has a pulse, steady and unhurried. When the fringe lies straight, she trails it on the surface of the water so the threads learn to hang. Then she draws it back against the stone and presses it into a tidy line with the flat of her hand. A neighbor arrives with a basket balanced on her head, its rim wrapped in old linen to soften the touch. She lowers it with a bend of the knees, not the back, and greets the group with a nod that says both good morning and may your work be light. From the basket she unties a small strip with a mark stitched in red. The mark is a simple sign, a house name. Marks help cloth find its owner, and every family has a favorite, a fish, a palm frond, a ladder of 3 lines. The women glance at it and place it on the mat with other pieces from that house, so the folding can keep to a pattern each household prefers. They rinse a length of linen used to wrap bread. It holds the scent of last evening's barley and the faintest sweetness. Bread cloth does not ask for bluing, it wants only clean hands and patient rinsing so the weave stays soft. When it is laid to dry, they leave its edges loose. The cloth will learn its work again tonight when it wraps fresh loaves and holds their steam for just long enough. A man from the Scrabble school up the bank passes by with a bundle of rush pens and a small jar of black ink, the mouth sealed with a dip of clay. He pauses to watch a moment as the blue water catches in the bowl, and he smiles without teeth, setting his basket down to rest his shoulder. No one speaks. It is enough to share the cool and the sight of an ordinary thing done well. He goes on, the reeds in his bundle whispering against one another like light rain. The sun rises another finger. The women change their footing on the sand to keep balance easy. They spread a clean cloth on a low reed frame to make a shade for the child, who has been set to sorting the pairs of sleeve ties by length. He lays them in rows like little roads and straightens them by stroking each with 2 fingers, smoothing the twist. A dragonfly returns and decides that the child's knee is a fine landing place. It rests and fans its for clear wings in tiny, quick beats. At the edge of the workspace sits the repair basket. It holds spare thread pulled from worn cloth, a bronze needle with an ear large enough for the linen's width, a short awl that widens holes without tearing fibers, and many little pieces of cloth saved from hems. Between washings, one of the women chooses a tunic with a small weakness near the shoulder and sets it on her lap. She places a patch so that the weave lines up with the garment's weave, then whips the edges with nearly invisible stitches, stopping often to smooth the fabric flat. The needle slides, dips, and rises, the rhythm as regular as steps on the river path. Small repairs at the laundry saved households the cost of new cloth, in many places and times. The laundry did double duty as a quiet mending room. They turned to the bluing bowl again for one last piece, a garment thin enough to show the shadow of a hand behind it. The woman stirs the water with a slow circle of her fingers, feeling for any settled clay. When the water is even, she lifts a corner of the garment in and lets the blue take it, then draws it through and out, a smooth unbroken motion. It is like dipping a wick down, pause, up so balanced that no part stays longer than another. She does not wring. She presses a palm along the length as if she were sealing a message into the threads. Near the higher bank, the sand has warmed, and the reed mats give up the damp easily. A fainter scent of the river rises from the drying cloth, clean and mineral, with a small sweetness like cut reeds. One of the women lays a flat stone on the corner of the mat to keep a new breeze from playing. The wind moves differently before noon. Its fingers are longer and like to tamper with edges. Wait is a kind answer to mischief. The child has counted the sleeve ties twice. He brings them to the woman who is folding, and she pairs each with the garment it remembers. They tie the sleeves across the chest in a soft knot. For larger pieces, a band of cloth passes around the folded bundle once and tucks into itself. When she stacks the folded garments, she turns every second bundle the other way, so the stack sits steady in the basket. The basket's base is round, but the load is square. The alternating helps both. There is time now to tend the tools. The beater's face is checked for splinters with the pad of a finger. None found. The bonecomb's teeth are counted by habit always complete. The reed brush's binding is tightened a touch with wetted cord. A strip of linen rubs the washing stone where many palms have pressed, tracing a circle that honors the place. The natron jar is plugged firmly and set in the shadow of a basket so it keeps polite in the heat. The blue clay bundle is wrapped and tied with its own stained string, a badge of long use. From upriver, a faint drumming arrives oars on a ferry, slow and even. The sound seems to tell the body to move at that pace, and so the folding keeps to it. Lift, lay, smooth, press, turn, stack. The women talk a little now, not of heavy things, but of the little ones that anchor a day. A neighbor's goat that found a weakness in a fence, a row of onions that will be pulled tomorrow. A jar whose lid has forgotten its fit and will need a new wax ring. Their words are light and spaced like stitches. A basket is full. The woman who folds sets a woven ring on her head, a cushion that will carry the weight comfortably. She lifts the basket with both hands, rises in one smooth line, and settles it onto the ring. For a moment she stands still to let her balance find itself. Then her feet go to the path flat, certain steps that do not hurry and do not tire. She will deliver this load to 2 houses along the bank and be back before the second shadow line reaches the mat. The path is smooth, the air is kind, and the basket rides as if it were part of her. Back at the water, the others rinse their hands and forearms to the elbow, letting the river's coal clear the starch and clay. They lift the shade a little so the child can watch the minnows more easily. He leans on his elbows and names the larger ones in a whisper. The day has tilted but not yet turned. There will be one more cycle wash, smooth, dry, full before the sun asks the work to rest. Far out, a pair of ibis rises with dignified wings. Near at hand, a tiny bubble from the riverbed reaches the surface and pops with no sound at all. The women breathe with the river. The work goes on. By late morning the river begins its gentle conversation with wind. Small scales of light cross the surface, and under the shade frame the air feels a little cooler, as if the reeds themselves breathe out calm. The women shift their baskets to keep the cloth within easy reach. The child, satisfied with minnows, returns to the mat and sits cross-legged, hands resting on knees, listening to the steady whirl of work. They begin the pleating, which is its own quiet craft. A fine tunic, damp but not dripping, is laid on a flat board that once was part of a door. The board has a memory of straightness. Its green runs like thin water lines. One woman draws the cloth into narrow folds with her fingertips, the way one might coax a fan to close, always in the same direction so the pleats share a mind. She does not rush. Each fold lies like a page turning. When a length is pleated, she rests a smooth palm stone on it and taps along the ridge with the beater, gentle and even. The sound is a soft knock, 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 like a small animal at a friendly gate. Pleated linen appears in many paintings, and reliefs to keep it. The folds were set damp and dried under weight, then renewed often, a rhythm as ordinary as sweeping a threshold. To hold the pleats while they dry, she slides a thin reed through the folded edge and lifts the garment by that spine to the line. The reed keeps the weight even so the folds do not sigh open. Sun presses its warm hand along the ridges, a little steam rises and disappears. The pleats will shine a bit when they are dry, a sheen not of oil but of many small threads agreeing to lie close. On the mat, another woman tends cars. Some have narrow bands woven double. She wets her thumb and rubs the edge until the thread sits smooth, then pinches the band, press, release, along its length to teach it firmness. She turns the band to catch the light and checks for any tiny whisker of fiber that might tickle a neck. These are trimmed with a small knife whose edge is kind rather than sharp. The knife lives in a reed sheath with a loop for hanging. It smells faintly of reeds, and the oil rubbed in to keep it from sulking. The bluing bowl is opened once more, this time for a sash that will be worn on a feast day. The woman stirs the clay gently to a single tone. She dips only the ends, letting the blue climb halfway up each fringe. The color is not loud, it speaks in a low voice. When she lifts the sash, the water falls into silver sheets, and the fringe hangs like quiet rain. She lays it on a narrow reed ladder so both ends can dry the same way, balanced and true. At the edge of the workspace sits a lidded jar of starch water, thin as milk. For heavy cloths that prefer to stand well, she paints the starch along hems with a reed brush. The brush has a steady spring, it leaves a film that dries clear. She smooths it with the side of her hand so nothing gathers in a lump. Later the hem will hold its line, the way a riverbank holds a curve after many seasons. They pause for the day's middle meal. The cloth has to dry, and hands need their rest. On a low mat they set a small clay bowl of salt, a dish of olives, a flat of coarse bread scored in diamonds, and a jar with beer under coal wrap. The bread breaks with a pleasant sound, and steam threads up once, then is gone. They eat slowly, dipping bread in oil and salt by turns. An onion is peeled and sliced with the kind knife. The slice is pressed with the flat of the blade to tame the bite. The child receives a date with the stone already freed, and he pushes the sticky halves together again, pleased that they remember one another. While they eat, one woman turns the pages of her day's list in the air, not on papyrus, but in order of piles. Each household's cloth lies stacked by size and kind. She checks with her eye as if reading marks in ink, large tunic, small tunic sash, 2 cloths for bread, 1 sheet. She touches each stack only once. Households often sent cloth with a messenger and a tally, the laundry's skill included counting without fuss and returning exactly what arrived. A trust that lived not in signatures, but in hands that remembered. When they rise, the shade has crept, so they pull the reed frame a little to keep it kind. A breeze lifts the edge of a mat, a flat stone goes there, polite weight against a playful world. The pleated tunic is nearly taut. The beater taps again along the ridges, not hard, just a reminder that the fold is desired. The sound travels a short way over water and returns softer, A call and answer hardly different. A neighbor stops on the path with a basket of broken pottery. She is not asked for in the washing, but she has come to trade a few sherds for a handful of blue clay for her own brightening. The women greet her with a nod, and one brings the clay in a small paper packet made of woven papyrus scraps, used again, used gently. The neighbor leaves a painted sherd that shows a lotus into strokes. The child sets it near his knee like a treasure. He strokes the lotus leaf with one finger, surprised that paint does not come away. Now comes folding for the fine pieces. Folding is not only neatness, it is teaching cloth how to wake. A sheet is folded long, then across, then long again, so that when it is opened at home and shaken twice, it will find the bed without argument. A tunic is folded so that when it is lifted by the shoulders, the pleats drop into place in one breath. The dresser of the household will still do her own smoothing, but the laundry sends the cloth home as if it already knows the room it will enter. Payment is small and ordinary. From a pouch with a long tie come a few copper bits, a measure of barley in a little sack, and sometimes a twist of wool thread or a fig. Today, the messenger from the first house brings a pinch of fragrant resin wrapped in leaf for the brazier at home, and the women receive it with a quiet smile. Such gifts are a way of saying the work is seen. The resin is set near the oil pot so the scent drifts through the last hours. They check lines and seams. Where a hem began to travel, a few extra stitches go in up, over, down, the thread pulled just snug enough. Where a sleeve edge shows a thin place, a patch no bigger than a fingernail is set within the hem where it will look like part of the fold. The needle's path is smooth. The thread prefers to follow rather than to be forced. The women's faces remain calm, neither pleased nor worried. This is simply the right thing for cloth. One of them pours a little water over the washing stone and rubs it with a linen scrap, as if thanking it. The stone darkens, then dries. Its skin is the same as before. The beater is wrapped in a piece of worn cloth to keep the wood from cracking in heat. The reed brush stands bristles up to dry, and the bone comb returns to its pouch with a small click. The natron jar is lifted. It is heavy enough to promise another day and light enough to be kind on the walk home. The child gathers stray pebbles into a small circle, as if making a little enclosure for the lotus sherd. He looks at the women for permission. They nod a little. He sets a green reed across the circle like a gate and touches it lightly with his palm, then leaves it alone, satisfied. Along the bank the ibis return. A barge drifts far out, its square sail so still it looks painted. In the shallows, the cloths that needed only a moment more are ready. Each is lifted with both hands, given a small shake so the threads wake, and folded as it likes. The baskets fill in even layers, each layer at right angles to the one below so the load will ride steady. The woven head rings are shared, one given to the neighbor who will carry her house's share uphill. Last, the women wash their tools, not with soap, only with the river, and wash their hands with the same attentiveness they gave the cloth. Oil softens their wrists and the corners of their thumbs. Sand rubs clean any stain that wished to stay. The shade frame is folded into motions and laid against the largest basket. The path will carry them home, and the day will still be kind when they return for the final round. Above the far bank, a vulture hangs without moving, not hunting, only gliding on the heat's quiet stare. On the near bank, the mats are almost empty. The river keeps its small talk. The work is nearly done for this turn of the sun, and the linen remembers what the hands have told it. Afternoon ripens toward the hour when shadows trade places with light. The linen has finished learning the shape of air. The women begin the small, deliberate ceremony of leaving, which is not a rush but a sequence. Baskets are loaded in layers that alternate direction, corners meeting corners like tiles on a calm floor. Between some layers they lay a thin reed mat, so the pleats of tunics do not argue with the hems of sheets. The head rings, woven circles padded with old cloth, are set within reach. One woman tests the weight by lifting a basket to finger's width and feeling how it will travel. The bodies that will carry it read this message without needing words. Before they go, they attend to the river's boundary. The washing stone is nudged back exactly where the bank prefers it. The shade frame's twine is coiled so it will not catch a reed on the next return. A straight pin is found and tucked into the hem of the beater's cloth, as if the cloth were a pocket. A handful of sand is rubbed between palms to take any remaining oil, then rinsed away. These motions are so steady and small that a bird in the reeds does not lift its head. 2 baskets are lifted, each to a different crown. The ring sits like a soft moon between hair and the weight. The women straighten their spines, the load becomes part of their height. A 3rd basket finds its place on a shoulder, the arm curved around it like a guardrail. A 4th is slung with a strap across the back of the youngest, who smiles because this is the weight that means she is trusted. The child carries the reed ladder and the beater cloth, taking small steps that match the longer ones without trying. The path home is the same path that brought them here, but now it is a ledger being balanced. It passes between low tamarisk and a field where barley stands shoulder high, heads nodding as if agreeing to every statement. A lizard slips crosswise and disappears under a stone as neatly as a thread into a hem. At a bend, the women step aside for a farmer leading a small donkey. The donkey peers at the baskets, as if wondering if there might be a carrot pinned beneath a fold. The women smile with only their eyes and keep their pace, which is neither quick nor slow, only appropriate. They stop at the first household. This is a place they have known for years, a doorway shaded by a palm mat, a water jar with a wet collar of clay, a small painted god watching from a shelf by the lintel. The servant who receives the laundry is older than the baskets and has fingers that know how to measure cloth by weight. The washer sets the basket on a low bench. She unfolds the top piece and lifts each item by its edges, as if presenting it to the air that will live with it, then hands it over. The servant rolls the fold once more to fit a shelf and hums an agreement, the tune ordinary and grateful. Payment is a little dish of barley and a few copper bits from a cloth purse that closes with a wooden toggle. A sliver of soap scented with kiffy, no bigger than a thumb, is added for good feeling. It will make the next wash more pleasant. Small gifts in either direction were common currency of regard, a way to keep the relationship smooth, like rubbing oil on a hinge so a door does not remember to complain. At the second house a mark is checked. The household inked a tiny sign on their linens ages ago, a triangle with a dot at its heart. The women know it the way they know the river's curve. Marks were practical, names, small pictures, and owner's initial in hieratic script. The washer points to a triangle and dot on a sheet, and to the same on her tallied shard, not boastful, just clear. The servant nods before the words arrive, and tucks the sheet away. Accuracy is not decoration. It is trust with edges. Between deliveries, the road shifts from dust to hard-packed earth. The sun angles, not fierce now, but sure of itself. The women walk in the strip where the wall throws shade, and that shade moves with them like a slow companion. A fig seller passes with a tray. He sets the tray on a folded cloth on his head exactly as the baskets are set, and for a beat they are the same, trays and baskets riding on human tallness. Then the moment dissolves and each returns to its errand. At the third gate the house cat inspects a sleeve fringe with grave attention, then flicks its ear as if to say the work is acceptable. A boy takes the pile to a room that smells of cedar and dry straw. He sets the folded tunics in a chest where they will sleep side by side, edges aligned to a line you do not need your eyes to see. On the way back, he presses his thumb into the pleats of his own shirt, trying to teach it to behave like the fine ones. The thumb leaves a brief order that loosens by the next corner. He shrugs and laughs without sound. When all the households are visited, the baskets are lighter but not empty. The women carried back their own cloth, the garments they washed for their families at the day's edge. These are folded with the same eye. A patch on a child's tunic is receipted with 2 more stitches because nothing prevents care. They will take these home, and their own room will smell faintly of river and read until morning. At their threshold the baskets come down gently, first to a hip, then to a bench, then to stillness. The head rings are hung on a peg to air. Sweat will leave and not stay. Hands are washed again, this time in a small basin, where the water can later feed a thirsty jar plant that lives outside. The day's shard, the little tablet of tallies, is set in a niche near the door with others from days and months past, edges worn smooth by being moved and moved again. In many places, scraps of broken pottery, ostraka, served as everyday notepads for lists and records. They were easy to find and did not mind rough treatment. There is a last, quiet round. The tools receive their evening kindness. The brush bristles are combed with the bone comb and tied in a soft sleeve so they will think straight by morning. The beater's face is rubbed with oil and wiped dry so its wood will not splinter. The washing stone is covered with a cloth so night dew will not surprise it. The natron jar's plug is twisted snug. A dish with the remaining blue clay is set high under a little awning where children's hands will not tip it by curiosity. Supper is simple. Lentils warm in a small pot. A sprig of coriander is crushed between finger and thumb and sprinkled over with the same precision given to pleats. Bread softens against a splash of oil. The child watches the steam draw a tiny fog on the pot's rim and traces it with a fingertip, then licks salt and laughs softly because salt always remembers to taste like itself. The stories told are small, a bird, a fig seller, a cat with opinions. Nobody tries to make them larger. Not every day wishes to be a banner. Most are content to be a well-folded cloth. Night leans in at the doorway. From far upriver someone sings a steady tune for the oars, and the sound lies on the air like a reed on water. The women lay out tomorrow's head rings, where they will be easy to greet. They look at their hands, which are clean now and a little shiny from oil. The tiny nicks along the knuckles that came from years of thread and stone are like letters in a language only the hands read. That language says, there was water, there was sun, there was cloth, and there was time enough to do the work right. If you could hold the day up to the light, it would show a weave small, even, durable. The river is quiet now, and the mats on the bank cool under stars. Somewhere a dog turns twice and sleeps. The linen will wake soft in houses that trust it. And tomorrow, if the weather agrees, the path will carry the same feet, and the river will speak the same syllables, and the laundry will repeat the quiet, necessary poem it knows by heart. And as the last reed shadow slides across the empty washing stone, we turn from water and woven fibers to open grass and a fence of poles where a fresh horse, a hot kettle, and a sealed pouch measure the night's long road. Evening settles over the grasslands in long silver strokes, and the relay yard receives the soft idea of night without protest. A square of ground, simply fenced with poles and rope, holds the necessary things: a line of hitch posts polished by many rains, a lean-to of rough boards to keep the wind from the tack, a low hearth of stones where water agrees to steam, and a pair of small pens where fresh mounts wait with ears tilted toward the horizon. The station keeper, a quiet man with felt boots and the wool cap pulled low, stands with his palm on a mare's neck, feeling the slow thud of a heartbeat that has learned patience. He listens to the grass before he listens to the road. The grass often tells him first. This is a place where movement pauses just long enough to begin again. A sealed pouch, leather soft from many hands, will arrive, rest, and leave. Saddles will change sides. A name will be noted on a smooth board with a charcoal stub. The yard is not dramatic. It is tidy. That tidiness is its strength. In many eras, riders carried proof of authority, sometimes a plaque or token. Here, the keeper trusts the system and the sign, and he trusts his own practice even more. The keeper checks what needs no hurry. On a row of wooden pegs, bridles hang in order from coarse to fine like lines on a simple song. The nosebands are plaited rawhide, the cheek straps are rubbed with butter oil till they shine in the last light. Girths, wide and soft, are rolled so their buckles do not bruise the leather they sleep against. Saddle blankets, felt edged with stitch ear on a rope between two posts. Each blanket remembers the back it will touch. The keeper has marked them with a thread color that is not loud but speaks clearly to his eye. He stoops to stir the coals of the hearth with a twig. The kettle, dented and faithful, breathes steam you can see only when the kettle's breath meets the evening's breath. Tea will be ready for whatever ride arrives. Sometimes it is brick tea shaved thin with a knife and cooked with a pinch of salt. Sometimes it is warmed milk with a shy sweetness. Sometimes a splash of sour mare's milk makes the cup lively. The keeper will not decide until he sees the rider's face and hears the tiredness of the horse. Hospitality in places like this was not ceremony, it was infrastructure. A boy, narrow shoulders, quick feet, returns from the well with a gourd sloshing against his hip. He sets it near the pen and rests his hands on the post to feel the vibration of a distant hoof. There is none yet. He grins anyway. He loves to be the first to know. The keeper nods without looking up. He has seen the grin in other faces on other evenings. He knows the boy will learn to listen for movement not with ears alone but with bones. The fresh mount snorts softly and troubled. The keeper runs a brush down the horse's barrel, slow strokes that persuade the hair to lie in the same direction, then lifts a hoof and picks out the day's small gravel. The hoof pick is bone-handled and smooth from years of hands. It fits between the frog and the wall as if made for this hoof, and not for hoofs in general. He checks the bit by habit, cold metal on his knuckle first, not into the mouth yet. He rubs the bit with his sleeve to warm it a little. Metal that meets tongue should not remember the night air too sharply. These small graces are not written rules, they are what happens when people take pride in continuity. He crosses to the tack lean-to and chooses a saddle with a tree that will not bite this horse's withers. The saddle is wood and leather, high-fronted and high-backed to hold a rider steady when the ground runs quick under hoofs. He feels the seams with 2 fingers to be sure the stitching has not softened where sweat collects. He sets the saddle on the blanket with a practiced lift and draws the girth only until it is kind. Tight will come later, after a step or 2. At the yard's far side, a ledger board leans against a post. It is a piece of wood smoothed by use, its edges rounded like a river stone. Notches along one side mark how many exchanges the station has seen this week. Beside it, a little pouch of soot-black ink and a reed pen wait for names and hours. The writing is not a flourish. It is a quiet trail for someone who may ask a question on a winter day when memory feels slippery. The boy sorts spare shoes by size in a shallow basket, small crescents of iron that smell faintly of the forge in the next district. He counts them aloud in the way children count, with 2 rhythms going at once, one for numbers, one for satisfaction. He lays a hoof rasp beside them, and a small hammer with a head bright from use. A farrier's kit belongs to the station, even if the farrier himself comes only when asked. A loose shoe at night does not wish to wait until morning to become comfortable again. The light thins to a color that cannot decide between blue and green. Wind moves across the yard without changing its mind about anything. From the line of the road a point appears, becomes a shape, then a rider, not fast, not slow, but steady, the way people ride when their horse has carried many miles, and deserves to end this leg with dignity. The keeper does not hurry toward the gate. He does not dither, either. He simply is at the gate by the time the rider is near, and his hand opens the rope latch in the second between footfall and greeting. "Water," he says, which is both a question and an answer. The rider's smile is small and sincere. "Please," the rider says in words that ride another language, but step down gently into this one. The keeper takes the reins while the rider swings down. He sees the crease of dried foam beneath the saddle flap, and the dark sweat on the horse's neck. He sets the reins on the hitch-post and loosens the girth one hole. The horse exhales everything it was holding and becomes a little taller. The sealed pouch changes hands. The keeper feels its weight and its stiffness, notes the wax stamp that sits like a button on leather. He does not hold it long. He sets it on the shelf inside the door of the lean-to, under a leather flap that keeps dust from making itself important. Seals and carriers vary by road and season, but the habit of not letting the message sit where a wind could read it was common sense in many places. Tea pours. The kettle says a small tinny hello to the cup. The rider takes the first swallow without ceremony, then the second with a little sigh. The boy offers 2 mouthfuls of boiled barley in a wooden bowl. The rider eats it in 3. A worn glove is pulled off and set on the plank table, and the hand beneath it is not old, only tired. The keeper sees a thin string around the rider's wrist, and knows by the knot that it is a family's favor. He does not remark upon it. He returns to the horse. Blanket off, blanket on. Saddle off, saddle on a low form. He fetches the fresh mount and brings it to the rail and for quiet steps, then under the rider in one. The leather speaks in its small language of creaks. The girth tightens, now, not rudely, just competent. The boy slips a lead through the worn bit, and the horse accepts it like a handshake it knows. A hair from the horse's forelock catches in the keeper's sleeve. He brushes it away with care, not because the hair matters, but because what he is doing matters. He makes one more turn around the yard with his eyes. Tack, straight, cinch, firm. Stirrup leathers, equal. Messages, sealed. Ledger, ready for a mark. Fire, safe. Water gourd, refilled. A simple place like simple completeness. Overhead, the first true stars claim their spots. The rider sets a foot to the stirrup and rises, easing into the seat so the horse's back does not learn a jolt it did not expect. The keeper hands up the pouch and the reins together, a gesture practiced so many times that it feels like a lullaby sung to two listeners. The rider nods his thanks, sets his knees just so, and turns the horse toward the road that is no longer a line but a direction. The hoofbeats begin again, a polite drumming that fades into the grass's own hush. The keeper watches until the pair become a shape, and the shape becomes a point, and the point becomes only a thought that the grass will keep. He scratches the ledger board with time and initial, draws a tiny mark for the exchange, and leans the board back where it belongs. The hearth makes the last, small remark of steam. The boy, still listening with his bones, sits on the step and tries to pick out the difference between a rider far away and the wind's own idea of hoofbeats. The keeper lets him listen. Night is a lesson taught by repetition. The station breathes. It is ready to pause again. It is ready to begin again. When the sound of the departing hoofbeats finally dissolves into the general hush, the yard returns to its other kind of work, the sort that happens between arrivals. The keeper loosens the knot at the gate and walks to the horse that has just finished its leg. The animal stands with eyes half closed, grateful for stillness. The keeper lays a palm on the shoulder, then down along the rib, feeling where sweat has made a map. He speaks a word not because the horse will answer it, but because voices soften hands. Saddle off, blanket off, and the back is allowed to breathe. The blanket is lifted with two hands so the air does not slap the damp coat. The keeper brings a wisp of clean straw and rubs in slow circles that move with the hair, not against it. The horse leans into the rub the way a tired person leans into a chair that knows their weight. The boy watches the circles and imitates them on the hind quarters, small hands making small weather there. Between them, horse and people arrive at comfort. A little water is offered in a wooden bowl. Not a full drink at once, the keeper tips it in portions, and lets the horse's lips decide when enough is enough. He has seen what impatience can do to a stomach. He waits, then offers a handful of cut hay that smells faintly of last summer's grass. The hay is not a feast, it is a reminder that chewing is a pleasant thing. The horse chews, and the yard feels proud of its own good sense. In a corner of the lean-to, the tack stands in a small congregation, saddle on its form, girth draped, bridle over the peg. The keeper wets a cloth and wipes the sweat and dust from leather. Where the cloth turns dark, it tells the story of the road without boasting. He lifts a pot of animal fat and works a fingertip along the straps, not enough to make them sticky, enough to tell them they are cared for. Stitching is checked, a loose end is persuaded back into the rhythm of its neighbors. Leather does not live forever, but attention lets it live longer. In many places, oil and patience were more valuable than new gear that was far away. The bit is rinsed in warm water. He lays it across his palm to feel for burrs, the way a miller tests flour between finger and thumb. Satisfied, he hangs it where night air will not make the metal moody. The saddle blanket is shaken lightly and slung over the rope to dry. The boy straightens the line of blankets, because straight lines make him feel taller. The yard's pens receive the just-arrived horse, who now wishes to turn into the wind and measure how the air tastes. The keeper checks the latch twice, once with habit, once to respect the horse's curiosity. He draws a comb through the mane to lift out the dust and any small burr the road offered as a souvenir. From a pouch, he brings a pinch of salt and crumbles it into the feed pan. The horse's tongue will tell him if he wants it. A moth finds the fire and thinks better of it. The kettle breathes once and rests. The boy settles on the step with a slice of dried curd and watches its edge become soft in his mouth. He listens to the grass the way the keeper has taught him, counting the layers of sound, wind, insects, the rope's slight creak, a ground bird's idea of a question. He taps the step with one finger in the pattern of arrival, far nearer, here. The keeper hears the tapping and smiles without looking. Inside the small shelter, the ledger board waits. The keeper notes the last exchange in ink that smells of soot and patience. He adds a short mark beside the notch that stands for this evening, so that in a week, when the steward rides through with questions and a roll of paper, the answers will be ready and untroubled. The reed pen is wiped on a cloth, and the cloth shows the history of many evenings like this in soft gray. A strap, cut earlier from an old saddle that had decided to retire, lies beside an awl. The keeper threads a length of sinew and repairs a loop that had been promising to fail. The awl's handle is polished by years of fingers. It turns without squeak in the leather. The sinew pulls snug and lies flat. The boy, seeing the neatness of it, tries to keep his own breath as even as the stitches. The keeper does not mention this. Praise is not a bird to be forced from a hedge. Above the yard, the sky has finished putting on evening and has begun to wear night. Stars appear in arrangements the keeper has known since he was thinner and less patient. He does not name them aloud. He keeps the names in his throat where they feel like small smooth stones. On some roads, riders navigate by rivers and hills. On this wide grass, the sky is also a road, and a person with work at night knows the value of carrying a map that cannot be stolen. The wind freshens, not to trouble the pens, only to say that the northern weather has remembered the yard. The boy pulls the lean-to's felt curtain a little closer to the ground on the windward side, pinning it with a wooden peg. He has learned that smoke which cannot find a door will make one for itself. The keeper adjusts the stones of the hearth so the last coals can dream without mischief. From a peg near the door hangs a string with knots tied in groups, a simple tally the boy uses to remember tasks. He runs his finger along the knots, naming them softly: water drawn, blankets aired, tack wiped, feed measured, gate checked, ledger marked, spare girths laid out, shoes counted, kettle clean, lamp trimmed. He adds a small knot for one more thing done right: the latch on the east pen repaired with a new slip of rawhide. The string swings with satisfaction, a tiny breeze in a room made of duties. In the pen, the horse shifts weight and rests a hind hoof its favorite way. The keeper observes the stance, sees no tightness, and lets his own shoulders settle another fraction lower. He lifts the tail gently and checks where flies sometimes bother the skin. Tonight the air is kind. He leaves a smear of ointment anyway because kindness can be doubled without cost. On a low shelf, a packet of tea bricks shares space with a pouch of dried meat and a small jar of pressed curds. The keeper breaks a corner from the brick into the kettle, adds water with the rhythm of pouring that does not splash. Tea is not a celebration here, it is a companion. The boy will have his cup half milk, half water, sweetened with a lick of honey the station traded for last month. He will hold it with both hands and rest his chin briefly on the rim, feeling the cup's roundness, as if to memorize it. Sometimes travelers pause without a pouch, a shepherd with a question about weather, a cart driver with a wheel that wants a wedge, a woman with herbs to sell for the road's small aches. The station takes these pauses as part of its duty. The road is also made of people who are not urgent. Tonight, no such shadow appears at the gate. The yard keeps its own company, which is to say it keeps company with the next thing that will need doing. A narrow cloud crosses the stars and decides it is not needed. The boy points, then lets his hand fall. The keeper shows him, with a tilt of the head, how to listen along the fence line for a loose strand. They walk it together. Halfway down, a peg stands proud where it should lie flat. The keeper kneels, presses it into the earth with a gentle and stubborn pressure, and puts his palm on the rope to feel the way it hums when touched. The fence is not there to imprison. It is there to suggest a boundary the horses will find reasonable. Back by the hearth, the small lamp waits, a clay bowl with a wick that drinks animal fat and gives it back as a quiet flame. The keeper trims the wick with a thumbnail so it will not sputter. In many places, lamps have kept watch for human eyes in the long space between dusk and dawn. A modest light can carry more comfort than brightness. He sets the lamp where ledgers live, and where the kettle casts a shadow that looks like a sleeping bird. The fresh mountain the near pen hears a thought on the wind, and lifts its head. The boy hears nothing. The keeper hears a thread of rhythm that might be hooves, but could be the wheel song of insects on a warmer patch of ground. He does not announce it. He returns to the gate, checks the knot, and rests a hand on the post as if to shake hands with the night. The post shakes back the way wood does, steady, not proud. The yard keeps breathing. That is how the keeper thinks of it, as a lung made of rope and posts, taking in riders, and letting them go, never quite empty, never crowded. Between the pulses, there is the ordinary labor that makes the next pulse easy. He begins with the girths. On a crossbar inside the lean-to, lengths of braided horsehair hang coiled and even. Their surfaces are half shine, half matte, the way river pebbles look when the sun is thinking about setting. He lifts one coil and runs it across his palm, feeling for any stiff stitch that might press a horse's skin, where roughness speaks. He warms a little fat between finger and thumb and persuades the hairs to lie down. The breed agrees, and the coil returns to its hook with a small, contented sway. On the bench, a short stick wrapped in leather serves as a fid, a quiet tool for opening space in the braid when a splice is needed. The keeper takes a frayed end and tucks it back into the body of the strap, teasing it through the pattern until it disappears, and the strap remembers it has always been whole. The boy leans in, watching the path the fid makes, memorizing the way the keeper's hands move without hurry. Like tying a cloud, the boy says, not to be poetic, only to help himself remember that pressure should be kind. Outside, dry dung cakes rest in a neat stack near the hearth. The keeper breaks one and feeds the slow fire. The smoke is soft and pale. It smells of grass already traveled once by an animal who admired it. Heat rises under the kettle and drifts toward the lean-to where leather and wool enjoy it in their own way. A crate holds the small things that always need attention. From it, the keeper takes a linen wrap that hides thin iron rings and buckles. He checks the tongues for burrs with the pad of a thumb. He breathes on a stubborn spot, and the iron shows a patient black instead of rust. A strip of felt, cut from an old pad, becomes a new cushion under a buckle that has been whispering against a horse's side. Felt is one of the yard's quiet doctors. It mends without talking about it. Hoes do not wear iron here. The grasslands are kind and soft, and the distances are many. Still, hoes like to be noticed. The keeper brings a small pick and a knife to the pen rail and lifts a forefoot, cradling it against his knee. The horse accepts the bargain, trust for gentleness. Packed earth falls away in small crumbs. The knife's curve kisses the soul where it needs to breathe. Nothing is taken that cannot be grown again. The boy watches from the other side of the rail, nearing the keeper's posture without a foot to hold. Later, he will practice on a piece of wood, as he always does when the yard has no spare hoof to lend him. Beyond the fence, the step makes its long statement in one word: wide. A thin path of stakes marks the relay line. Each post has a simple cut at its top, a sign the riders know, a small tooth that points the direction like a modest finger. The keeper has made those cuts when wind and time have polished them away. He knows the distances between the posts the way he knows the width of his own hand. He could walk them with his eyes closed, counting steps, and arrive at the gate at the right moment to pour the next cup of tea. Back under the lean-to, a felt saddle pad lies on its back, belly to the air. The keeper lifts a brush of bundled twigs and strokes the nap so it rises evenly. Felt holds memory. It knows the shape of a horse's back and the places where weight prefers to settle. He fingers a seam and adds to stitches where travel has made the cloth thoughtful. The thread is sinew moistened so it will pull and then shrink tight as it dries. The needle glides like a reed through water. On a peg a rider's pass, a small plaque of metal, hangs with the straps. It is polished by many hands, and by the years it has ridden the road. The keeper touches it with 2 fingers, not to claim it, only to remind himself of the trust the road places in the station. The boy asks if he might hold it for a breath. The keeper nods. The boy weighs it the way children weigh the first heavy stone they are allowed to carry. He returns it, and the plaque swings once and then is still. A woven rope line stretches along the shade side of the yard, where spare mounts wait their turn. The keeper walks the rope, pausing to lift a forelock to smooth a fly from an eyelid, to check that the strap that keeps the halter honest has not drifted loose. He is not asking these horses to be friends. He is inviting them to find the yard reasonable and predictable. Horses accept invitations more readily than orders. Across many places and times, people who keep animals learn that rhythm and calm hands turn work into agreement. In the small storehouse, bags of cut hay sit like patient cushions, tied with grass rope, ends tucked. A low shelf holds grain measured for the handfuls that some tired mounts appreciate after a rough lead, not a new rule, just a kindness kept in a jar. The keeper lifts a lid, inhales the smell of last field and sun, and closes it again, because tonight the horses have been gentle to themselves, and the grass outside is enough. He kneels by the hearth and pours tea into 2 shallow bowls. The boy takes his with both hands and sips, face mild with attention. The keeper's bowl rests on his palm. They drink like people who are not in a hurry to be finished. The steam makes a small weather round their faces. A thread of milk turns the tea the color of a good path in late summer. When the bowls are empty, the keeper wipes the rims with a cloth and sets them to dry where the fire can see them. He goes to the ledger and draws a thin line beneath the last entry, a way of saying to the future, "This was one whole thought." The reed pen's nib makes a whisper. Ink wicks along the wood the way water learns a channel in a field. On the floor by the doorway, a bundle of narrow sticks lies wrapped in cloth. The keeper aunties it and counts. These are pegs for tent ropes, carved in spare hours from wood that offered itself. He keeps them because sometimes a rider arrives with a strap tired of its work, or a pack with no idea what its corners are supposed to be doing. A peg or a wedge becomes a new idea, and the road continues with a better mood. The boy brings the little broom and makes a path across the yard where hoof prints have folded the dust into hieroglyphs of earlier feet. He does not erase them. He translates them into a smoothness that will be kind to the next set of hooves. The broom whispers, and the ground answers with a soft scrape like an old song remaindered to its chorus. Night gathers itself. The constellations lift their shoulders over the roof line. The keeper stands in the gate and measures the air with his cheek. It is cooler now, and the scent of far water reaches him, perhaps a river saying its own prayer to the dark. He counts his breaths in twos, the way he learned when he was younger, and worried that time might arrive before he was ready. 2 is a friendly number for breath. It arrives and returns without making a speech. From the south, a thin beat travels on the skin of the night. The boy tilts his head. The keeper does not answer the sound with words. He walks quietly to the nearest fresh mount and places a hand on the horse's neck. The horse lifts its head, not alarmed, not sleeping. The keeper checks the girth, feels the stirrup leather, tests the buckle's tongue with a small tug, and slides the bridle over ears that accept it like a hat at a door. The bit rests in the mouth, cool and polite. He smooths the forelock so it will not tickle. He fastens the throat latch to fingers, easy, no tighter. He opens the gate and stands with the reins loose over his thumb. The horse shifts weight into readiness the way a person moves from a chair to the edge of a chair. The boy goes to the ledger board and lays it open, the way a door is opened before a guest arrives. He sets the lamp a little higher, not to make it bright, only to make the corners willing. The sound draws nearer and resolves into the small drum of hooves that know where they are going. The keeper steps to the path and breathes out once, long and soft, so his own breath will not be surprised by the arrival. The yard, which has been busy with brushing and checking and stitching and drinking tea, becomes a single smooth surface. The work between riders has prepared the work with riders. In a station like this, readiness is the most beautiful thing there is. The rider arrives like a sentence that knows its verb. Not fast, not slow, just exactly the speed of a message that has remembered how far there is to go. Dust to his knees, felt cap low, he leans forward in the last body length so the horse feels the station before he does. The keeper lifts a hand, palm out, more greeting than signal. The yard has already made room for the motion that follows. The reins pass to the keeper without argument. The horse's breath blows warm into the evening as the rider swings down, one boot squeaking against leather. The boy is there, not quite close, holding the fresh horse, as if it were a bucket full to the lip. The exchange takes place in 3 soft touches. Old reins into the boy's crook of arm, new reins into the rider's left hand, the small pouch into the keeper's 2 palms. The pouch wears a leather flap tied with a narrow thong. On the knot sits a bead of wax with a mark pressed into it, the sign of the last post. The keeper holds the packet close to the lamp. The seal is untroubled, the thong is not frayed. He turns it once because turning once is the habit that catches the rare thing that wants to be caught. Satisfied, he slips the pouch under the ledger board's lip where the papers rest between one leg of the journey and the next. A skin of water waits on a hook by the door. The keeper lifts it and tips a mouthful toward the rider's face. The rider rinses dust from tongue and teeth and swallows one small sip. He does not ask for more. He does not need to ask. The keeper pours a second mouthful into his palm and offers it to the horse that has carried the road to the station. The horse licks the water, then rubs its nose against the keeper's sleeve, not saying thank you exactly, just returning the gesture in the way horses do. The boy walks the tired mount toward the rope line, talking under his breath about nothing urgent. He loosens the girth with a practiced pull and shifts the saddle so the horse's back can breathe its own shape again. The night air feels cool on damp hair, steam slips away like a thought that needed to be thought only once. Brush and cloth, a circle for sweat marks, another for dust, and the horse begins to look more like a promise than a task. It will eat, drink, and think about standing still for a while. At the gate, the rider steps a foot into the stirrup of the fresh horse. The boy has already shortened the leathers by 2 holes. He knows riders by their trouser creases and by how much the old horse's stirrups had asked of them. The rider settles, feels the saddle's soft spine, and tests the girth with the weight of a heel. The keeper leans in and lays the reins across the horse's neck, then adds the small loop of safety, a twist that sits between finger and thumb, one of those knots that loosens with a touch but never tightens by accident. Only then does the keeper bring out the pouch. He holds it with the seal toward the rider so both can see that the travel between hands has been honest. The rider nods once and tucks the packet under his coat at the place where wind forgets to pull. The keeper indicates the ledger board. The rider's gloved finger presses a mark beside the hour's notch, a way to say I was here when the wood said I was. In some places there would be a long form to sign and a wax to pour. Here, the wood remembers without ink. Across the steppe, stations use many kinds of records, a wooden tally, a knotted string, a metal token. What they share is that they know how to live in dust and wind. The keeper puts a felt bag with 2 small cakes of dried curd into the rider's hand. Not a meal, only a reminder to chew when the road goes on longer than a thought. He offers the tea skin. The rider takes one swallow of the salted brew and lets it rest in his mouth before it goes down. It may seem unusual to drink tea with milk and salt, but on grasslands where riders work in air that lifts water away, this blend keeps thirst from making noise. The rider wipes his mouth with the back of his glove. He looks toward the line of stakes like a man listening for a friend he trusts to speak soon. The keeper steps back. The horse moves forward with a beginning that has no jolt in it. Hoofbeats climb the fence and drop to the other side, already lighter than they were coming in. The boy watches the rider become a shape, then a line, then a suggestion. The suggestion joins the road and is no longer his to think about. After departures, stations breathe out. The keeper turns to the horse that arrived. He lays a hand on the neck, and the neck has cooled to a temperature that feels like the evening's opinion. He leads the horse to the water tub and lets it drink in intervals, not letting greed argue with comfort. Between drinks, he rubs a linen scrap along the jaw so the skin will pay attention to the hand and not only to the water. When thirst has become reasonable, he offers a small portion of grain from the jar. The horse chews the way patient animals chew, part food, part story ending. On the bench, the girth from the tired saddle lies slack, a river after rain. The keeper lifts it and threads a leather thong through a buckle where a tongue has grown loose. He stitches with small, even bites that have learned their distance over years. The boy brings the felt pad and lays it where firelight can find its nap. He takes the twig brush and works in strokes that follow the grain of the horsehair webbing. He does not rush. The pad becomes flatter, then rounder, then simply itself, which is all a pad wants. The kettle speaks quietly. The keeper adds a pinch of brick tea and a little milk to the water that remained after the first brew. The second boil is not strong, but it is wise. They pour into bowls and drink with the understanding that this is not a celebration, not a lullaby, just the station's way of making the middle of a night look like a table. A leather wallet on the shelf holds small slips of bark with neat cuts along one edge. Each cut is a station between here and the next far place, a reminder of distances, and of which posts tend to grow snowdrifts early. The keeper runs a thumb along the slips and stops at one. He makes a tiny notch beside an older one, not because he doubts himself, but because Wood likes to be told a thing twice when winter is a possibility. Outside the fence, wind combs the grass in long, parallel lines. The row of spare mounts shifts, then settles again. A foal, old enough to make opinions about fences, stretches its nose through the rope and decides the night snows of iron from stars. The boy drapes a felt over the foal's back and steadies the strap that keeps the world from arriving too quickly. He whispers to the little body about how gates are doors, and doors are ideas that open and close. The foal hears tone more than words, and relaxes into the blanket's thought. The keeper checks the lamp's wick and trims the charcoal at the heart of the flame with a wire. The light steadies, honey soft, and no smoke argues with it. He sets the lamp lower and carries it along the fence, pausing to press each knot in the rope so that sleep will not teach slackness. Rope learns the hands that use it. A pinch at each tie keeps the memory bright. Under the lean-to, he rolls a spare strap and slides it into the linen wrap that hides metal rings. He puts the bundle back in the crate where small answers live. He hangs the brush with handles down so bristles will dry into usefulness, not into sculpture. The broom goes into its corner with the straw pointing skyward, a polite gesture to the mice who prefer to think the broom is only a tree with its roots in the wrong direction. In the ledger, he draws another line, a quiet horizon across the page. The boy sleeps now, kneeling against the wall, chin in the hollow of both hands, the way children fold when they trust the floor to be a bed. The keeper lays a felt over his shoulders, and tucks the edge beside the elbow so drafts will go on him like water on a rock. He steps to the gate for a last look. Stars have taken their places. The road is a ribbon of temperature more than light, a ribbon that feels cooler where hooves have polished the dust. He listens. Far off, there is nothing, which does not mean there is no rider, only that this part of the night belongs to the crickets and the thin call of an owl who has found the fence post useful. The keeper smiles without showing it, and returns to the hearth to add one more cake to the coals. The station breathes in. The station breathes out. The yard keeps its promise, to be ready when readiness is asked for again. By the time the lamp's oil creeps one finger width lower in its glass, the night has settled into the kind of quiet that has room for small sounds. Leather sighs as it cools. Somewhere beyond the fence, a fox considers a mouse and then postpones the question. The keeper's feet remember which boards can be trusted not to speak. He moves as if the building prefers to dream. He reaches for the little chest that holds needles, balls, and thread. The lid lifts with a soft wooden breath. The sinew thread has been polished with a touch of grease so it will pass through leather without taking arguments along with it. He checks the buckle strap he repaired earlier, tugs once, and nods. The station is a place where almost everything can be kept good by hands, and what cannot be kept is turned into spare parts and stories. Across the posts, broken tack is rarely thrown away. A strap that has forgotten one job often learns another. The boy stirs under the felt and blinks without waking fully. The keeper sets the kettle for a last warming before the slow hours. He takes the brush and strokes the mane of the tired horse until the hair lies in long, tidy waves. The animal stands with one hind hoof cocked and its head lowered in the way of horses who believe, for a few moments, that the world is not asking for anything. Stars wheel with a patience that people admire because they themselves cannot manage it. The keeper looks up from the yard and counts without counting. The belt that points east, the bright one that rides low, the smear of light that leans across the sky like a pale path. On calm nights, direction is not in doubt. In weather, riders think more about grass and smell and the way wind lifts from the shoulders rather than the knees. The keeper takes note of the high ring in the air, a faint halo around the moon that sometimes hints at thin cloud on the move. He files the hint under morning thoughts. He walks the fence a last time, palm along the rope, thumb checking each knot. Near the corner, a post has loosened in its hole by the most polite of amounts. He sets the lamp down, brings the mallet, and taps earth back into agreement around the wood. Not hard enough to wake the yard, just enough to help the post remember depth. A quiet yard is not an accident. It is the sum of these gestures that nobody writes on the ledger. Back at the bench, he opens the little pot of fat and rubs a trace into the twist of the boy's bootlaces, because leather that sleeps sweet wakes easier. He straightens the tally board so the notches line up with the edge. He sharpens the end of the marking stick with two short pulls of the knife. On the shelf, the bundle of spare pins catches his eye. He counts them without looking like a man who could tell you how many beans sit in a jar by the weight of the jar in his palm. From the east, a fold of wind brings the faintest sound, a hoof, not many, and not close. He does not stand straighter. He only places the lamp where its light will be useful and takes the pouch from under the ledger's lip so he will not have to bend later. The boy opens his eyes in the way of youngsters, who have learned to wake to a tone rather than a word. He slips his feet into felt and becomes noiseless at once. He leads a fresh horse from the line, strokes its neck, and makes the small, encouraging sound that brings the ear toward his voice. The rider appears like a thought that has finally decided to say itself. Not hurried, not slow, simply present. The exchange is all but the same as earlier. Reins pass. A packet moves from glove to palm. The seal shows itself whole and honest. Yet each trade has its tiny differences. This rider's hat brim is heavy with dew. His belt cord is newer than his coat. The horse has been shod with shoes bound by rawhide, the choice some paths prefer. The keeper notices because noticing is the trade he practices, even more than the passing of pouches. They do not speak more than a handful of words. The post keeps a savings of speech for weather and for moments when speech is needed. A swallow for the rider, a mouthful for the horse. The boy adjusts one stirrup a finger width lower with a tug of the strap. The rider's thanks is a tilt of the head that says the measure is perfect. The fresh mount steps out into the ribbon of dark, and the station lets the sound trail away until it joins the larger hush that lives on the road. After, while the kettle finishes one last round, the keeper writes a small mark on the inside of the gate with a piece of charcoal. It is not a sign for others. It is a note to the gate itself. You have opened and closed cleanly tonight. Keep that habit. He hangs the charcoal on its nail so no one will go searching for it when sleep has made the brain prefer shortcuts. The boy brings a shallow tub of warm water and a rag that smells faintly of soap. He wipes his hands and then offers the cloth to the keeper, who does the same, careful to work the water into the creases where dust likes to sit as if it pays rent. The simple washing is its own small ceremony, the kind that tells the body it has done enough for now. They eat a crumb of leftover flatbread with a smear of dried curds softened in tea. It is not feast food, but it is fuel that does not start arguments inside. The horses shift in the yard like clouds that have agreed to stay together. The foal has found the corner of the windbreak where the night cannot surprise its belly. The keeper checks the latch and lays his hand on the top rail a moment longer than necessary, not to test the wood now, but to thank it for holding. Gratitude is not spoken aloud here. It is laid down in the way things are put away. Inside, he snuffs the lamp and leaves only the banked coals to read the room with their soft, reddish grammar. The ledger lies open to the page with lines that run like the steps of a staircase. The last two notches are still darker than the others. Ink would have been blacker, but cuts have a kind of honesty that needs no drying time. He gently closes the cover so dust will not think it has an invitation. Soon, the edge of the world will lighten by degrees, the way milk turns water less transparent. The first birds will decide the fence is a tree after all. The kettle will mutter and then settle. The boar will wake properly and stretch with joints that have not yet learned to complain. The keeper will step to the yard and breathe the taste of cold grass. He will slide the bolt and let the gate remember how to open toward morning. For now the station rests between riders like a bead on a string exactly at its place, doing what beads do, holding the distance in the shape it should have. The keeper closes his eyes, not to sleep, but to sit at the door of sleep and listen for the next sentence the road will send. And as hoofbeats fade into dawn and steam from the kettle finds the quiet roof beams, let us leave the open grass and step indoors to a low table in Edo, where a cracked bowl meets resin powder and patient gold. We return indoors, where light is gentle and the room is arranged to invite calm work. A low cedar board rests on tatami. The board has been dusted with a faint sprinkle of fine powder, so tiny grains will catch any drifting speck before it lands where it should not. On the board lies a quiet puzzle. Pieces of a porcelain bowl placed in a slow circle, edges meeting, then easing apart again, as if remembering how to be one thing. The bowl is simple and fine. Its glaze is soft white with a hint of blue. Near the foot, a brush mark sits like a breath held and then released. The break is not violent. It is a set of cracks and a missing chip, the sort of damage that comes from years of use and one small mistake. The pieces are clean and dry. A soft brush has already passed over them, lifting crumbs of clay and a ribbon of old starch that once kept a hairline tight. The lacquer worker sits with quiet posture. Cotton sleeves pushed back to the elbow. On the mat at hand, tools rest in an order that makes sense to fingers. A thin bamboo spatula with a rounded tip. A short knife with a gentle curve to its edge. A pair of tweezers whose ends meet perfectly. 2 small bowls made of wood, their insides wiped with oil so sticky things will let go. A fan of soft paper squares cut from washi. A little packet of hemp fiber tied with string. A brush with hairs of badger or weasel, trimmed to a tidy point. A lidded cup where gold powder sleeps, like warm sand. Near the wall stands a cabinet the size of a stout chest. Its door opens with a cloth hinge and a wooden pin. Inside, shelves are lined with damp cloth, and a tray of fresh leaves sits to give the air a little water. This is the warm box where lacquer hardens. Lacquer does not dry the way paint does. It prefers moisture and softness in the air. A brazier nearby warms a small kettle, not for tea alone, but to feed the room a gentle steam. The kettle ticks like a careful heartbeat. Before any joining, there is looking. The worker turns each shard in the hand. Fingers read the edges, and the glaze the way as read a line of ink. A piece is set against another, then rotated a finger's breadth, and set again. Dry fitting shows where the break wants to close and where it hesitates. A hairline that seems one line from above may ask for a touch of trimming underneath. For that, a small stick of willow charcoal is rubbed once along a stubborn edge. It leaves a trace and it smooths just a whisper of clay, nothing more. A bowl of water sits at the far corner. From it, a cloth is lifted and run until only a cool damp remains. Each edge is wiped and then left to breathe. This is steady work. There is no hurrying lacquer. There is no hurrying the meeting of edges. Outside, the lane gives a little sound of a cart's wheel on joinery stones. The paper shurji blush with morning. The room answers with warmth and patience. Now the first binding is mixed. In one of the oiled bowls, a spoonful of raw lacquer is placed. It is deep brown, almost black, and glossy as a river at dusk. From a small jar, rice paste is added white and mild, the texture of custard. With the bamboo spatula, the two are folded together until they agree on one smooth body. The smell is faintly of tree and earth. The mixture is called a friendly name by people who work with it often, paste lacquer. It will grip the shards, yet allow them to settle into perfect seal. A drop is lifted on the spatula's back, and touched to the inside edge of the largest piece. The layer is thin, almost invisible. A second shard receives its own narrow band. The worker brings the two together, not with pressure, but with alignment. The seam closes like lips that have decided the secret has been said. A simple hemp thread, untwisted to a soft ribbon, is laid across the join. A paper strip follows, brushed with a touch of clean water so it will lie obediently. The paper is not tightly wrapped. It only keeps the pieces from shifting while they learn to agree. The same is done for the next break, and the next. The room stays quiet. The brush rinses often in a small cup, wiped on paper that will be burned later, so nothing sharp or used remains in the drawer. After each join, the worker holds the bowl up to the light and watches the seam with one eye closed. The line is not hidden. It is made honest and neat. Where a sliver of space remains, it is left for later filling. This work does not pretend that nothing happened. It chooses instead to give the event a careful future. While the new bonds are tender, the bowl must rest where the air is right. The cabinet opens. A soft hand lifts a folded cloth into place to make a cradle. The bowl is settled, seen side up, so gravity will be a helper, not a critic. The door closes. A small slip of paper is tucked under the pin with the hour written on it. Lacquer asked for patience measured not only by the sun, but by the feel of the room. In damp summer, the wait is shorter. In cool months, it stretches, but the pace remains a friend to sleep. Waiting is work too. The worker rinses the spatula, wipes the bowls, and arranges the tools again. A tiny amount of fine clay powder is sifted onto a sheet of paper to make tomorrow's mixture for smoothing. It is called a polishing earth by some, and it will meet lacquer to become a paste that closes pores and prepares the scene for bold. A second bowl receives a pinch of sifted rice flour for a different stage of tender filler used before the final line is drawn. The names of these mixtures vary from shop to shop, from teacher to student. The hands know the proportions better than any written page. Next, the worker tests the breath. Not with a sigh, but with a thin bamboo tube held near the back of the hand. A gentle exhale across the skin tells whether the breath will be warm and steady enough to carry gold later without stirring dust. It is a practice done each day. The tube is set aside on a clean cloth. The gold will not be needed until the bowl has endured its long cures, but practice belongs to the quiet hours now. Tea is poured from the little kettle into a cup that remembers many mornings. The taste is mild and roasty. The cup warms both palms. From the street, the seller calls, the sound fades like ink in water. The worker looks at the board, now bare of shards, and feels the small, pleasant emptiness of a step completed. The paper strips across the seams will hold while lacquer learns to be firm. The warm box keeps its own weather. An hour passes like a boat on a slow canal. The worker opens the cabinet just enough to let in a fresh breath of damp. A folded cloth is dipped once in warm water and run. It sits on a tray to keep the air kind. The bowl is left undisturbed. A second, smaller piece of chipped rim fragment that will not be used comes to the board now for practice strokes. A brush tip touches a whisper of lacquer, then draws a fine line along the broken edge. The hand learns again the speed that leaves a skin without ridges. Later, when gold meets lacquer, that speed will matter. For now, it is only a rehearsal, the way a singer hums scales when the hall is empty. There is no hurry to lift the paper. There is no hurry to name the scene. The day can hold other tasks, cleaning a tray, combing a brush, placing a note in the ledger that this bowl came from a tea shop 2 alleys away, and that its owner asked for patience over speed. In Edo, people mend what serves. A repaired bowl does not blush. It shows its history the way a riverbank shows the path of last spring's water. This is ordinary. It is also tender. When at last the hour slips as the first set has begun to hold, the cabinet stays closed. Early handling breeds regret. The worker lays a cloth over the board, puts the gold cup back in its lidded box, and covers the brush hair with a paper sleeve so dust will not borrow bed. The room returns to stillness that feels like folded linen. Outside, a bell marks a moment at a nearby shrine. A cart's wooden wheel passes over a join between stones with a hollow click. Inside, the kettle makes 3 small sounds and goes quiet. The bowl, in the dark, finds its first strength. The seams breathe and then calm. What was broken has begun to be one thing again, even if its line will remain visible by choice. When we return, we will lift the paper, touch the joins, and begin to fill the tiny gaps so the future line can be smooth under the gold. For now, let the cabinet keep its soft weather, and let the room hold its peace. Morning has turned a little, and the room holds a gentle warmth. The cabinet's wooden pin lifts without a sound. A small breath of damp air moves out like steam from a rice lid. Inside, the bowl waits in its cloth cradle. The paper strips that held the joins have gone from bright to a mellow tone, as if they know their work is nearly done. Hands move with a habit learned over years. The worker touches the rim first, not the seam. Temperature speaks through clay. If the bowl feels cool and even, the lacquer is likely finding its strength. The paper is dampened with a clean brush tip, barely a touch, just enough to help it let go without tugging the join. One corner lifts, then another. The strip peels away in a slow ribbon and rests aside on the board. The hemp thread slides free and coils like a quiet worm on the mat. Where two pieces met, a thin line of paste has squeezed out, as planned. It is not a flaw. It is a promise that the join is filled from the inside. With the little curved knife, the worker shaves this ridge while it is still tender, taking almost nothing, only the shine. The blade moves away from the seam, never toward it. Each stroke is short and patient. Paper gathers the crumbs, then folds them shut. Now the tiny gaps are easy to see. A sliver where glaze flaked away. A soft bite missing from one edge near the foot. These places will accept a different mixture, a smoother filler that sands clean and receives a line. On the board, the worker brings 2 powders together with a touch of lacquer, a fine, chopped like earth, and a sifted clay used for polishing. The spoonfuls are small. A drop of raw lacquer is added and folded in with the bamboo spatula. The paste becomes the color of wet straw and holds a peak when lifted. If it drags, a breath of water at the spatula's edge makes it willing. This mixture is spread with a friendly name in some shops and many names in others. What matters is that it flows into the smallest valley and evens the path for the gold to come. A strip of washi, damped and pressed against the board, becomes a rude palette. The tip of the spatula picks up a mere bead and places it along the seam. The touch is light. Filling is not icing. It is listening. The paste goes only where a shadow tells it to go. Each little stroke is leveled with the spatula's belly, then feathered with a clean brush that has almost no lacquer in it at all. If a bubble shows, a breath nudges it to break. If a corner is shy, a whisper of hemp is set in and buried so the edge will not crumble later. Some breaks ask for depth. A missing chip near the rim would leave a pocket under any line. For that, a firmer body is needed. The worker mixes a small ball of lacquer with fine sawdust and a pinch of sifted powder, kneading it on paper until it is even and warm. This putty is pressed into the pocket, smoothed almost flush, and then scored with a crosshatch so the next coat will have a sure grip. A damp cloth cleans the rim. The bowl goes back into its warm box to let these fillings begin their quiet change. While the cabinet does its part, the board becomes a place for gentle shaping. A piece of willow charcoal is cut to a thin wafer. Charcoal is both tool and friend. It polishes and reflects. Dipped in clean water, it takes a sheen and slides across lacquer without scratching when the time is right. Not yet. For now the worker prepares it, slicing faces square and then softening the edges with a few passes on moistened paper. The cup of water is changed. Dust does not belong near the future line. And our passes with small chores. The brush box is wiped. The gold cup is checked for any hint of damp, and then set aside again. The ledger receives a line with the day's characters, and a note about the seam near the foot that asked for a deeper fill. A swallow flicks across the courtyard. A neighbor knocks a ladle against a bucket. The room holds those notes and lets them fade. When the cabinet opens again, the fillings accept the next step. They look dull, which is correct. A fingertip run lightly across the seam feels a slight ridge here, a quiet hollow there. The willow wafer, dipped and tapped dry, meets those places with a whispering stroke. The motion is always short, always in the direction of strength across the seam, not along it, so the join is tested and made firmer at the same time. Between strokes, the worker brings a drop of water with a folded paper to sweep away the milk that rises from lacquer and earth. The surface grows smooth under the charcoal's careful care, like a pebble tucked by years in a stream. A touch of oil, just a dot of camellia on a cloth, polishes the path and keeps dust from clinging. The oil is not left on the line. It is wiped until the cloth comes away almost clean, a faint gloss remaining only as a polite barrier against stray grit. Now the foundation for the golden seam asks for its first true skin. Raw lacquer is strained through silk into a clean bowl so no bark fleck or thick bit will make a lump. The brush is woken by wetting and wiping on paper until its hairs lie like a single ribbon. A line is drawn, not wide, not thin, but certain. It follows the seam exactly, neither wandering nor pretending. The stroke is one breath long. The brush lifts when lungs are empty, and places a last dot to finish the path. Where the line curves, the wrist turns, not the fingers, so the edge stays even. At the ends of the seam, the brush tip makes a tiny taper, like a river meeting sand. Gold looks kinder when it fades at the ends rather than stops like a wall. The bowl returns to the warm box with the line facing up, cradled so no edge or cloth will touch it. The door closes, the pin drops. A slip of paper records the hour and a small mark to say that this is the first coat along the seam. gold does not come yet. It asks for a surface that welcomes it without sinking. After this coat comes a second, perhaps even a third, each thinner than the last, and each rubbed gently with wet charcoal when the day tells you it is ready. The worker writes this plan in the margin of the ledger like a shopping list of time. Line, rest, smooth, line, rest, smooth. Each stage is nothing in itself, but together they are a promise kept. While the bowl rests again, practice continues on the spare shard. A narrow stripe of lacquer receives a pinch of bronze powder with a soft breath from a tube. The powder falls like pollen, not like grain poured from a scoop. It lands and sticks where the lacquer glistens and refuses the dry places. A clean, broad brush, its hairs trimmed short, gathers the extra and moves it aside with a tap into a lidded jar. The line shines dull at first, then bright after a faint rub with silk. The worker learns again how close to hold the tube, how strong to breathe, and how the powder behaves when the air is too dry or too bold. Nothing in this is hurry. All of it is listening. A little food appears, rice still warm under cloth, a slice of pickled daikon, a wedge of tamagoaki with its sweet egg layers. The worker eats without leaving the room. Shoes wait outside the threshold. Dust stays where it belongs. After the meal, hands are washed with water scented by a leaf. Clean hands are tools too. The cabinet opens once more before evening. The scene looks even, the shine is low and steady, and a fingertip, barely touching, finds no ridge. The willow wafer skins once, then twice, across the line, and the cloth follows to lift any whisper of residue. The second coat of lacquer goes on thinner than the first, drawn with a breath that begins before the brush touches down, so the start of the stroke has no pool. The end of the line fades as before. Back into the warm box the bowl returns, to dream in humidity and become ready for its bright river. Outside, light leans toward gold in the alley. A vendor folds his cart. A bell at a distant gate sings once and goes quiet. Inside, the tools are put to sleep, brush hairs jacketed in paper, lid set, knife wiped and wrapped, the bamboo tube placed where sleeves will not brush it by accident. The table is covered with a clean cloth that smells faintly of sun. Not everything in repair is visible. Much of it is waiting and tiny adjustments, the sort of choices that seem like nothing but make all the difference when a line catches the light. The bowl grows itself back by degrees. It is slow, but it is sure. When we return, the lacquer will be ready to meet its metal. We will test the breath, lift the lid from the gold, and carry a soft river across the seam so the man can become a gentle brightness. Evening leans against the shurji with a soft, hurry light. The cabinet's door, held shut by a wooden pin, opens as quietly as a thought. The bowl lies where it was set, cradled in cloth, the lacquer line now firm enough to accept a brighter companion. A palm hovers above the seam to feel the breath of the room, warm, damp, and kind, then withdraws. It is time for metal. The bench is cleared as if preparing a small stage. A sheet of clean paper is smoothed with the back of a fingernail so no ripple will catch dust. A short bamboo tube polished by years of use, and the habits of hands rests across a folded cloth. Beside it, a lidded cup holds gold powder measured earlier with a shell spoon. The powder does not look loud. It lies like pale dusk, almost beige, almost nothing, until a touch of light wakes it. A soft brush with trimmed hairs, reserved for lifting excess powder, waits in a wooden stand. Everything is close, nothing crowded. The seam receives its final underskin. Raw lacquer, strained through silk, moves into a shallow dish. The brush is awakened on paper with light, even strokes until the hair makes a single dark ribbon. The line is painted in one slow breath, following the drawing without wobble or hurry. Where the seam climbs the curve of the bowl, the wrist turns and the breath continues. At the end, the tip lifts to a taper thin as a thread. The lacquer sits with a tender shine wet, but not pooling. The bowl is left for a small while, just enough that the lacquer's surface becomes tacky, no longer a mirror, but a soft glow. This pause matters. In workshops like this, people say the lacquer should be hungry, not thirsty, ready to take, but not to drown. Words help memory. The gold cup opens with a careful turn. The bamboo tube is lifted. Its end is clean and dry. Powder is coaxed onto the tube's lip with the shell spoon, a small crescent that will become a dusting cloud. The bowl is angled so gravity is friendly, never threatening. Then comes the breath, steady, low, through the tube. Not a blow, not a puff. Just a warm exhale that the powder can ride. It falls like pollen across the lacquer river, finding the shine and refusing the dull sides. The line grows grainy at first, then satin, then suddenly it is a seam of quiet daybreak. Where the curve tightens, a bit more breath helps. Where a tiny corner asked for extra filler earlier, the gold rests heavier, as if it knows. The tube goes back to its cloth. The lidded cup closes against wandering air. The soft, trimmed brush, its hairs cut short to prevent any flip, touches down at the edge of the seam and barely moves, gathering stray powder into a tiny dune that slides away into the waiting jar. The bench stays clean. The bowl remains cradled, turned gently so each section receives equal attention. A fingertip never touches the line. Oil belongs to hands, not to gold. When the whole path is plated, the room seems brighter, though the light has faded. Gold is like that. It makes its own day. A broad, very soft brush goat hair this time passes over the line from a respectful height to lift any dust that thinks it should stay. Then the bowl returns to the warm cabinet. The door closes. The pin drops. Powder that has landed on the lacquer will sit there peacefully while the sap cures beneath it, joining metal and tree in a way that is both simple and surprising. A page in the ledger collects a few plain words, gold laid. Fine. No pits. The brush is rinsed, its hairs formed into a neat point against folded paper. The bamboo tube is wiped inside with a rolled sliver of washi so that tomorrow's breath will meet no clinging grain. The cup of powder returns to its box, which smells faintly of cedar. The worker empties and refills the water bowl. Clean water calms a room. Night opens its first stars somewhere beyond the eaves. In the courtyard, a small plant tilts toward cooler air. A neighbor's get a clap once on the lane and fade. The cabinet holds its even damp, neither fog nor dryness, just a balance that she loves. It is easy to think lacquer dries. It does not. It changes in warmth and moisture, hardening by a quiet, living process. That is why a box like this called a muro feels almost like a companion. It tends the work with its own soft weather. The worker sets a small alarm of the old kind, a candle nicked at a mark. When the wax reaches the nick, it will gutter and remind the hands that the next step can begin. While waiting, There is a familiar practice on a spare towel. A filed tooth of deer mounted in wood touches a patch of test gilt and brings it from matte to velvet. Burnishing is not rubbing hard. It is smoothing with patience. The test patch blooms slowly, like breath on a mirror going backward, becoming clearer with each pass. The candle dips. The cabinet opens. The seam has lost its powdery look and found a soft, fused skin. A smile does not happen on this face, but something like one rests in the chest. The gold looks even. A few tiny grains cling at the edges where lacquer was thinner. They brush away under the short, trimmed hairs with a sound like moth wings. Now the polishing begins. A small slip of silk is folded into quarters. A touch of camellia oil, no more than would gutter rice grain, is rubbed into the silk, and then rubbed out again until the cloth seems dry. The silk slides along the seam with almost no pressure. It is more a greeting than a task. This gathers the last loose powder and suggests the direction for the burnisher. The deer tooth comes next, its edge rounded by yours. It moves with the patient rhythm that comes from practice. Short strokes, lift, short strokes, lift, always across the seam, never along, so the line tightens rather than frays. Under the tooth, the surface changes character. The gold deepens from soft straw to evening honey. The line begins to catch shapes from the room, the shuji grid, the circle of the lamp, the small square of paper where the brush slept. The tool pauses often. Heat from friction is not welcome. A breath cools the tooth. The strokes continue, as small as the grains that first made the shine. At the seam's ends, where the line was tapered, the tooth is angled to keep that taper honest. A too bold polish could widen it and make the line look heavy. The point stays fine. Where the join crossed an earlier chip filled with firmer body, the burnisher makes sure the gold has not sunk. If it has a memory of lacquer and powder waits nearby to make good the difference, but today the seam stays level. A folded paper collects any glitter that strays. Even rescue powder has a home. Between sessions, a tiny breath of water touches the gold through silk to lift the warmth of the polishing, then the silk dries it in the same motion. This is not for cleaning, only for temper, a way to keep the metal and lacquer from arguing about temperature. The bowl turns in its cradle to present each curve without forcing the hand to reach or the sleeve to risk a touch. The work arranges itself to the body, not the other way around. When the burnishing is done, the seam is not a stripe. It is a river with banks that respect it. If the eye follows it, it will not splash. It will move at the speed of reading. The worker holds the bowl at arm's length, then near, then lets it sit on the mat and views it as a guest would from a calm distance. The gold neither shouts nor hides. It is present an honest record of what happened, offered without apology. A last kindness readies the piece for its final rest. A breath of powder pulverized rock so fine it feels like air passes over the seam through silk to absorb any hint of oil left by tools or hands. Then the bowl returns to the cabinet one more time. The door closes. The pin falls. The ledger notes, gilt set. Burnish.rest. In this craft, much of a day is made of spaces between actions. It is in those spaces that the repair settles into itself and forgets the excitement of being touched. When the bowl emerges again, the gold will be part of its body, not something sitting on top. After that, we can think about edges and the foot ring, about scuffs that ask for a hush of lacquer, and about the small ceremony of returning the vessel to use. Morning finds the room the color of steamed rice. The cabinet gives back the bowl with the steady calm of something that has kept a promise. The line of gold has settled into the lacquer's skin. It no longer looks dusted on. It looks grown in, as if the vessel had always planned for this. A fingertip, clean and cool, hovers close and does not touch. Instead, the nail of the little finger is used as a measure, the rim, an old habit to test level without leaving a mark. The seam meets the light evenly. The join does not snag a fiber when a soft silk square is drawn across. The repair has entered the stage where finishing is less about adding and more about listening. The bench is arranged again. A tray of powders sits at the left elbow, very fine white clay for the gentlest mat, a softer gray for easy shine, a pinch of powdered horn for places that want a silky slip. Each rests in a small shell so thin the morning light shows its grain. A wisp of cotton teased with a pin becomes the carrier. The cotton touches the powder touches the seam, and the surface learns to be of one mind from end to end. Not brighter, not duller, simply continuous. The rim asks for its own quiet attention. A shallow neck, far from the golden river, shows where the vessel once met a hard spoon. The worker considers it in the way some people read a weather line on water. Leave it, and the bowl keeps an honest sentence. Soften it, and sleeves will not snag during a tea practice. The choice is made for kindness to cloth. A brush with a few hairs lays a whisper of lacquer into the neck. A grain of finely sifted powder rests on top, turning the wet darkness into a workable paste. The tool that follows is only a folded scrap of washi pinned around the tip of a small stick. Touched and released, the neck becomes a curve again. It is not erased, it is conned. The foot ring comes next. In houses where tatami lie like quiet fields, a rough foot can scratch the straw. The ring is examined with a carpenter's patience. A flat stone, wetted and worn between palms, kisses the ring in 3 places, no more, to take down a proud bit. The sound is like a faint song, the note a bull makes when it is pleased. A soft cloth with a trace of oil gives the foot a last stroking. Now it will sit level on a tray, with no wobble to disturb a guest's hand. A narrow brush writes a small character in the ledger, the worker's mark, the month, the weather, a note, foot ease, rim soothe. Edo workshops often keep such lists, not for fame but for memory. If a piece returns in a season or a year, the work will be able to meet its earlier self without confusion. Some repairs travel across districts and even provinces. Records help the bowl feel at home wherever it finds a table. In this period, lacquer might arrive from the north, gold from a merchant street near the river, porcelain from kilns in Heisen or from farther seas, yet the finished object rests under one roof and Ni lamp. A city is a kind of cabinet too. Testing for use takes the form of warm water, not tea. A kettle on the brazier answers with a polite breath. The bowl is rinsed inside with water no hotter than hands enjoy. The gold does not mind warmth, but it is never the first greeting. Water runs around the seam as if curious about the new path. A linen cloth thin and clean presses inside the curve and lifts away, not rubbing, only taking what drops would leave behind. The line stays bright. The lacquer does not blanch. On the mat, the bowl makes a soft circle of dab, and then no mark at all. The storage that keeps a repair safe is its own craft. A square of kimono cotton, retired and washed until it feels like cloud, is measured against the bowl and hemmed along one side to make a pocket. This sleeve will hold the piece when it rests in a box. The cloth smells faintly of cedar because it slept in the same chest as the sleeves used for guests' cups. A paper tag is brushed with 3 characters: the client's house name, the bowl's nickname, the month. The brush is wiped on a felt pad until it forgets ink. The wooden box is plain paulownia, light and dry to the hand. Its lid slides with the unhurried sound of wood on wood. Inside, a bed of soft paper keeps the bowl from traveling, even if a street rickshaw rides over a seam in the road. A cord indigo cotton woven flat ties the lid in a square knot that looks simple, and opens only when asked. On the underside of the lid a small inscription is made, not a grand signature, just the date and the place. The box will let the piece breathe. Paulownia does that well. It resists damp and shares calm with whatever it keeps. Before the bowl goes to sleep, there is a last act of looking that belongs to hospitality rather than to craft. The worker sets a low tray near the window and places the bowl upon it as a guest might see it. The golden line is turned so it leads the eye from the hand's approach to the far rim, like a path through a garden. A sprig of camellia leaf rests beside, not as decoration, but as a reminder of the season when the crack first met the bench. The room falls quiet in the way rooms do when a task has been met with the right amount of care. The city beyond keeps its own rhythm. A seller of sweet beans sings a short phrase in the lane and pushes his cart on. A pigeon taps at the eave and decides against landing in another courtyard. Someone beats a rug with a bamboo paddle, dust rising like pale incense. The workshop breathes with all of that and with none of it. Inside these walls, the small world of tools agrees with itself. Brushes asleep in their sleeves, the bamboo tube wrapped and tied, the shell spoons nested, the cabinet's pen laid across the latch so it does not wander. Tidiness saves time tomorrow. It also rests the eyes today. Waiting for the client's messenger is part of the work. It brings a chance to think about how this bowl might meet its next table. Perhaps it will see the pale foam of whisk tea, or hold a clear soup with one green leaf placed like a thought. Perhaps it will return to a shelf and only be visited now and then. Its repair a conversation between past and present. In tea houses, people sometimes talk about the dignity of the ordinary. Repairs like this are one way that idea is kept close to hand. The break is not a failure, it is a record. The line is not a scar, it is a map of how care travels. There is also the matter of teaching. An apprentice enters with the quiet step of someone who owns a soft pair of tabi and the habit of listening. The worker shows the burnished seam, the eased rim, the foot ring that now sits as calmly as a stone at the edge of a pond. The apprentice nods and writes 3 small notes on a narrow page. Potter, little. Tooth, cool. Water, warm. These are not rules. They are friendships in words, small reminders that tools and materials have voices that can be heard if a person gives them time. When the runner arrives at last cap set square, cord at his waist he bows and offers the folded receipt. The box is lifted with 2 hands and placed into a carrying sleeve woven of straw and cord, more basket than cloth. There is no sealing wax, Trust is woven into ties and knots. The runner bows again. The room returns to its usual quiet, which is the quiet things make when they know they will be needed tomorrow. On the bench, a different shard waits, a cup with a chip like the moon's first smile. It will not ask for gold, only for a careful edge and a new soft path for the lip. Work sizes itself to the object. Not everything needs to shine. Some things prefer to whisper. Afternoon slants across the paper screens. The bench is clear, the cabinet closed, the box tied. For a little while the room belongs only to air and light. Then a soft knock travels through the frame, no hurry at all, and the client steps inside with the careful posture people keep in workshops where small things matter. His sleeves are folded back above the wrist. A winter houri hangs from his shoulders like a quiet cloud. He bows. The worker returns the bowl and sets the paulownia box between them, fingers on the indigo cord as if listening to it. The knot opens in one patient breath. The lid lifts. The cloth sleeve comes forward, and the bowl arrives on the low tray with the ease of something remembering home. Silence does most of the greeting. The client looks in the way a person looks at a familiar path after weeks away, noticing the same turns, agreeing with the new stone set to keep the walk dry. He traces the curve of the rim with his eyes. The gold seam lies like a thin river running from one bank of clay to the other. It does not shout. It simply keeps company with the glaze. A small kettle on the brazier gives a respectful murmur. Not for tea, just for warmth. The worker lifts a gourd ladle and pours a little hot water into the bowl. The water takes the shape and gives it back. Steam rights in the cold air and disappears. A soft cloth dries the curve. The client nods once. In some houses this nod has the weight of a page of praise. The ledger appears with its woven tie undone. The worker writes the date, the weather clear, light wind, the work seam joined, gilt, rim soothed, foot eased, and a note of care, store cool, rest long after use. In Edo, notes like this ride along with objects, a kind of polite conversation that continues from season to season. The page dries while the worker ties a narrow strip of paper to the box cord, a traveler's tag that will keep the piece from being confused in a household crowded with useful things. There is a short exchange of coins. They make very little sound, because coins here prefer cloth to wood. A corner of the client's sleeve lifts and settles again. He thanks the worker not with many words, but with one that sits between gratitude and relief. The bowl returns to its sleeve and its box and leaves the room in the crook of an arm practiced at carrying. Later, the bowl meets a different light. A small tea room waits behind a low door, its path through the garden marked by stepping stones that ask for deliberate feet. Inside, the straw floor is a map of careful rectangles. A scroll hangs in the alcove with 3 characters that rest on the eye instead of jumping. A single branch in a plain vase keeps the season. The hearth is live, but the fire is thoughtful rather than busy. The host sets the tray with both hands and turns the bowl so the scene greets the guest like a companion, not a secret. This is an old courtesy in rooms where attention itself is hospitality. The seam is part of the bowl's face now, a line that tells time not by hours, but by the life of clay and hands. The whisk fans open like a small broom made of light bamboo. Powder meets water, and a quiet green froth lifts its shoulders along the inner curve. The seam stays bright. The repaired rim is kind to the lip. There is no ceremony to explain aloud. There is only the clean taste of tea, the thin sound the whisk makes when it rises, the weight of the bowl shared in turn. When it comes back to its place on the tray, a folded silk cloth touches the foot, not to polish, only to meet the warmth and keep it company. A guest might ask, gently, about the line of gold. The host might answer with the name of the workshop, or simply with, "It broke in spring and learned to live again." The bowl sleeps afterward, back in its sleeve, back in its box. Between uses it rests, because lacquer likes to be a creature of patience, and gold, for all its shine, enjoys shade. The box returns to a shelf of other boxes, each with a small story brushed under the lid. Houses that keep such shelves also tend to keep a certain pace. Tasks begin before they are needed and end before they weary. Outside, Ito moves along. Porters sing to keep time with the weight on their poles. A rice dealer checks his measures with a look he learned from his father. A paper lantern blinks awake as afternoon leans toward evening. The river takes boats from one bridge to the next as calmly as a breath leaves and returns. In another alley, a carter rattles past a stall selling grilled eel. In this city, repair is not a rare event. It is part of the weave. Bowls, handles, roofs. Relationships, many things hold together because hands agree to meet them where they are. If the idea of gilding a crack feels unusual today, it is worth remembering that in this time and place, a mended object could be more beloved than a pristine one. The practice does not hide the fracture. It honors the care that followed it. Gold is not used for wealth display here as much as for clarity. The scene tells the truth in a kind voice. This quiet habit fits the taste of rooms where imperfection is not a flaw to erase, but a season to observe, like the first brown leaf on the edge of a bamboo grove, or the hairline in a tea scoop that fingers learn to avoid without being told. Back in the workshop, night arrives without making much of it. The brazier has been banked. Tools sleep in plain boxes. A bit of lacquer hardens in the corner of a dish, a modest blue-gray in the lamplight. The cabinet latch is set. On the mat lies a scrap of paper with a quick sketch of a chip, a note for tomorrow, and a smudge where a thumb thought while reading. The street beyond offers the lightest clatter of wooden clogs, then quiet. The moon decides to show itself between roof lines for a moment, and then forgets to insist. The worker closes the outer shutter and listens. Walls have a way of keeping the day's breath for a little while after the door is barred. In that fading warmth there is the simplest kind of satisfaction. Not pride, not tiredness, just the sense that objects and people spoke a common language today, and that nothing sharp was said. If the bowl returns in a year with a new faint line along its foot, it will be welcomed like a traveler with stories. If it never returns, the memory of its seam will remain in the ledger, in the hand that tied the cord, in the apprentice's 3-note page, powder little. Tooth cool, water warm. These are not rules. They are ways of being gentle. The lamp is pinched with brass tongs. The room becomes a shape in the dark. Somewhere across the city, other lamps are lowered, other doors lifted into their hooks. People put away the day. The scene, wherever it rests, holds its thread of light inside the box, and inside the memory of the one who made it. And as the gold line quiets in its cedar-scented sleep, and Ito settles under paper lamps, let's drift west across time to a tiled street where a brazier's last embers keep a copper pot friendly and OTOMAN Coffeehouse at closing. where cups are rinsed and stories take their gentle full stop. Night leans across the lane outside, and the door of the coffeehouse stands half open like a calm breath. Lamps along the beam shed small, steady circles that do not argue with the dark. Their light finds copper and wood, and the soft white of porcelain cups turned upside down on a tray, each one drying beneath its own little moon. The day has been full of voices and dice and quiet wagers, but now sound arrives in single beads rather than strings, the tick of a brazier's ember, the soft shush of a palm broom, the click of a lid. The proprietor moves without hurry, a man practiced at teaching a room to sleep. He wears a wool vest the color of walnut, and a cotton shirt that keeps its neatness even at this late hour. A sash around his waist holds a small knife for twine and a ring of keys that he never rattles. He lifts a copper sazety from the edge of the charcoal pan, checks the lingering heat with his hand open and respectful, and sets the pot to one side where the metal can think about cooling. The air carries a trace of roasted bean, not sharp, more like a memory that chooses to be kind. On the counter sits a small water jar of clear glass hand-blown, with tiny seeds of air trapped like quiet bubbles from a forgotten afternoon. Beside it, to Finken, the little handleless cups rest in their pierced metal zarfs, holders that keep fingertips from heat. A bowl of cardamom seeds waits with its lid close to the rim. Not every brew here wears spice, but the jar belongs on the shelf the way a familiar book belongs on a table. A narrow tray holds sugar lumps wrapped in paper twists. In this time and city, coffee is still most often taken plain, without milk, but small sweetness stays nearby for those evenings that ask for it. The last pair of players close their backgammon board the tavla with a soft fold. The wood has a good hinge, and the stones, black and ivory, settle into their pouch like obedient birds. One man tucks the pouch under his belt and nods, the other sets his hand to his chest and bows a polite fraction. There is no need for news, the day has already told itself enough times. They go, passing the cat that belongs to nobody, and therefore to everyone. The cat considers a cushion that still remembers a warm sitter, then chooses the woven mat under the counter, tail wrapped like a question mark that has decided to be answered tomorrow. A boy sweeps, guiding husks of pistachio and the brief glitter of sugar grains toward a straw pan. His broom is made of palm fibers bound with twine. It talks softly to the floor. He moves the low stools, a dozen little seats spread like islands, just enough to guide the sweep small river around their legs. Each stool turns back to its place with the easy triangle of 3 feet. The boy does not break the rhythm to hunt a single stubborn show. He knows that patient circles always find their way to such beads. On the wall, a shelf holds cups by size, saucers stacked in even towers of 5. The proprietor lifts each cup, glances at the lip for any nick, and sets it mouth down on a cloth that has been folded and refolded until its edges align like a careful book. The porcelain shows tiny clouds when viewed through the lamp's light, as if the glaze holds the sky's smallest breath. On a separate tray, cups that met the last hour's coffee rest beside a shallow basin. Warm water, poured from a brass ewer, runs across their insides in a stream that breaks into neat droplets. A soft brush finds the curve, not bristling, only encouraging. Rinse water moves to a second basin. When finished, the cups stand again on their saucers like little tents pitched for the night. In the corner, a long-stemmed water pipe cools from its earlier service. The glass base keeps a faint stain from 100 evenings, the pattern of a habit rather than a flaw. The hose is coiled this way and not that, because it learned long ago which loop prevents a tired crease. The proprietor empties ash into a clay bowl, taps the stem once with a nail of the right weight, and wraps the mouthpiece in clean cloth before placing it in a drawer. For those who like the detail, this kind of pipe borrows water to soften smoke. It belongs to a slower hour than the coffee's quick, honest wakefulness. Tonight it sleeps early, without complaint. A little account book waits near the till. A leather flap to keep the day from taking a drink of lamp glow. The book opens with a sigh that only paper makes. Inside, each page holds rows of small lines, names and tallies with dots for cups, a circle for a pot, a little slash for a pipe, and sometimes a note when a letter writer used the corner table. This is an ordinary coffeehouse, not a grand one with carved ceilings, but even here a calligrapher might have rented an hour of quiet at the back, and a student might have practiced a verse before giving it to a friend. The proprietor's pencil is short, its end bound with thread to keep the wood from splaying. He writes with an even slope, counting coins by touch, not because he distrusts his eyes, but because fingers learn numbers differently. From outside comes the distant, soothed sound of water at a fountain where someone fills a clay jar to carry home. A door farther down the lane sends out a neat rectangle of light, and then shuts it like a closed fan. The city, for all its size, knows how to be a good neighbor to sleep. Roof lines keep a balance against the sky, minaret shadows draw long, thin stitches across the night. If a breeze wanders in, it brings a hint of the Bosphorus salt, and stone and boat rub arriving through the gap at the bottom of the door as if it has used the path before and likes it. The charcoal brazier, a shallow pan set on a low stand, still cradles a living red here and there. The proprietor leans with the care of a person who has spent many years close to ember and metal, and has learned that heat appreciates respect. With a small iron tongue, he lifts out a stubborn coal and sets it onto a waiting tile, where it can finish its glow without persuading anyone to stay awake. On the bench, the long-handled spoon that stirred the grounds rests on its notch, the edge of the spoon darkened to the color of roasted walnut. A small jar of fresh water is covered with a cloth weighted by a single bead so no ash or stray moth claims it. He tends to the room's edges. A wooden peg carries a cloth for drying hands, its corner marked with a stitched red thread to remind anyone which side is already wet. Above it, a shelf shows an oil lamp for when wicks need saving. Tonight the hanging lamps have burned clean, their glass chimneys clear of soot because a pinch of salt was mixed into the oil earlier, a common trick, passed from bench to bench, that keeps flame modest and smoke polite. If you listen, there is a language here that is not made of words. The wake-ups return to the same place each evening, the small wedge slipped under a rocking stool leg. The habit of turning the door's hook so it does not scrape the wood. These are the courtesies a room extends to those who keep it, and those who keep it extend back. In this city and century, a coffeehouse is less about haste than about company and ease. News may flutter like a sparrow through its rafters in the afternoon, but the night belongs to slow breathing and order restored. The proprietor walks the line of the counter and straightens the tray of sugar, the jar of seeds, the folded papers. He wipes the counter with a cloth that smells faintly of rosewater, not for fragrance's sake alone, but because a few drops in the rinse keep wood cheerful. The grain rises slightly, as if the counter is listening. He sets his palm flat on it for a moment, The same instinct a miller has for warm timber or a bookseller has for a quiet stack. The room answers by being ready. The boy brings the straw pan to the threshold and tips the sweepings into a basket kept for such small ends. Tomorrow morning, a stall farther down the lane will be glad for clean flourish to start its brazier. Nothing is wasted if it can be asked to help twice. The boy sets the broom bristles up so they dry straight, a detail that spares future wrists. He glances at the cat, who has slid into sleep with the confidence of those who have earned it. On the lintel, the proprietor touches the wood with the back of his hand. Not a superstition, just a check for damp air, for the way seasons sit in beams. He draws the door nearly closed, leaving a hand's width so the night can come in and look around before it follows the last guest out. In a few minutes, he will lift the hook, settle the bolt, and turn the key in the way that does not wake neighbors. For now, the room simply breathes, and with the lamp still friendly and the cups at rest, we'll stay a little while longer and watch how the last embers fade, how water, ash, and cloth finish their quiet conversation before the door finally settles into sleep. The brazier exhales one last warm ribbon and then keeps its counsel. The proprietor lifts the ash pan with two hands, because ash that looks light can still surprise a wrist. He tips it into a clay jar dedicated to this one task. Tomorrow, a tinner who lives 2 alleys away will buy a portion of fine ash to use in his polish. Such trades make a neighborhood of, even when no voices are raised. A square of damp cloth goes across the brazier's rim. It makes a soft kiss and holds there, taking the heat out in an even way so iron does not complain and warp. The boy brings a wooden bucket from the yard. Water at this hour has a quiet taste, as if darkness thickens it slightly. He pours a little along the flagstones under the counter and follows it with the palm broom. The wash gathers the day's invisible dust and sends it toward the door in a patient stream. He avoids the cat, who has decided that sleep is a circle drawn tightly around for paws. The broom never touches the tail. This is a rule he learned on the first day. On a peg hangs a cotton cloth with a narrow blue border. It is the drying cloth for cups only, never for counters, and never for hands. The proprietor touches the edge to be sure it is dry enough for its duty. He lifts 3 cups, one by one, and sets them on a lattice tray that lets air flow. Porcelain dries better when it can breathe. He turns each saucer so that the little painted flower points toward the shelf edge. These flowers were fired onto the glaze in another city far away. The journey turned them into small stories. In this room they function as direction, not decoration. Knowing where things face helps mornings begin without questions. A rack by the window holds the glass chimneys of the hanging lamps. Earlier, when they were warm and loose, he lifted them with a cloth and set them to cool. Now, with a strip of linen and a small pinch of fine ash, he circles the glass inside and out until it shines. There is a simple truth in lamp care. A clear glass means less oil and a smaller flame, which means cooler air and easier sleep. He touches each wick with a brass trimmer, taking away only the part that will burn smoky tomorrow. He calls this teaching, not cutting. Wicks behave better when named as students. From the shelf he takes the tin of ground coffee and weighs it in his palm. The tin speaks through its mass. Plenty remains for the morning's first callers, porters who like a strong cup before shouldering. Goods A clerk from the whack who prefers a thinner brew and always sits near the door. Another tin in the storeroom holds fresh roasted beans. They are cooled in a wide tray and stirred now and then so they do not sweat against themselves. Today's roast was medium, the color of chestnut skins. He listens to the memory of beans cracking in the pan, a sound like tiny footsteps, leaving one room and entering another. There is a small mill on the shelf, a hand mill with 2 stones and a wooden handle. Sometimes the room chooses the mill over the mortar and pestle. The mill makes a calmer sound. Tonight he opens it and brushes out the corners. Coffee grounds like to hide in corners the way sleepers prefer the cool edge of a pillow. He keeps the brush in a sheath so bristles do not learn a stray bend. A scrap of paper is folded under the corner of the account book. He unfolds it and finds a small line he wrote at noon. Order charcoal. He smiles in a way that uses only his eyes. The charcoal merchant knows the quality this house expects. Dense pieces that burn with a steady heart. He writes a note for morning in a larger hand, then sets the paper under a brass weight shaped like a pomegranate. The weight is one of those objects that friend a counterfoilers. Its surface has known 1,000 fingers, and now looks as if it has learned to be warm even when cool. The boy brings forward the tray that holds the cardamom jar, the sugar twists, and a tiny dish of mastic pearls. He opens the jar and checks the seeds. Cardamom likes a tight lid. A seed that has lost its perfume still looks perfect to the eye, but the room can tell. He crushes one seed with his thumb and forefinger, inhales its polite brightness, and nods. He closes the jar and wipes the rim where powder can collect. Mastic, the resin, keeps its own place. It sits in the dish and pretends to be small stones. Sometimes a visitor asked for a grain to chew and make their breath sweet. The dish returns to the shelf exactly where the round of wood shines from long habit. In the corner, a low shelf keeps a string-wrapped bundle of paper slips. They record credit that neighbors extend to one another when coins are shy. A shoemaker's name sits beside 2 dots, and the tailor's has 3. The proprietor aunties the string and tucks back a loose end, then ties the knot again. There is no hurry to collect. Trust sleeps well when it is treated like a well-made cushion. The sounder of the hour comes from the street, the soft iron tongue of the fountain's cup striking marble as someone hangs it back on its chain. Another sound, slower, comes from a sleeper turning on a wooden bed in an upper room across the lane. Houses talk across their narrow street through small creaks and releases, nothing sharp, nothing meant to wake anyone else. Farther away a boatman coughs twice, and the sound is more water than throat. The city's night has many islands of quiet connected by bridges of these little noises. The proprietor opens the small back door to the yard. Cool air rinses the room and carries the day out into the fig tree's leaves. In the yard, a bin holds kindling cup to thumb length. The boy arranges the sticks so tomorrow's hand finds the dry ones first. Beside the bin stands a water barrel with a wooden dipper hooked across the lip. The dipper's handle is bound with a strip of tin to keep a crack from wandering. This repair is neat, almost proud. A good fix is a blessing spoken in metal. On a peg near the back door hangs the apron he uses when roasting. It smells of smoke and a little of oil. He folds it with the clean side outward and tucks the ties under so the knot will not memorize a twist. He checks the roasting pan, the shallow, long-handled tava, and runs a cloth along its rim. One small grain of char tries to stay. He persuades it to leave with a fingernail. Pans remember kindness, and tomorrow's beans will turn evenly because this rind is smooth. He returns to the room and pauses at the low table by the window. This table has hosted many small tasks: a letter written for a man who dictates slowly, a chessboard set up by two scholars who never finish their game, a poem copied on a good sheet by a youth whose hand shakes with carefulness. Tonight the table is empty, but the wood keeps these imprints the way cloth keeps a crease. He sets his palm flat there for a breath. When a room is ready, it tells you in the way quiet deepens. The cups on the lattice tray have shed their last droplets. He lifts each one and nests it in its saucer. He places 4 sets on the front shelf for morning, and the rest he stacks in the order he favors: the strong porcelain forward, the delicate set behind, the 2 chipped cups together so a hand-seeking one will find its twin, and no guest will ever hold the only flawed piece. Such small strategies live inside good service and never announce themselves. The boy carries the basket of sweepings to the door. The proprietor follows with the ash jar. He leaves the jar just inside the threshold to cool further. The door's hook, an iron S-curve to kindness, waits for his hand. He glances once more around the room, not to check work, but to let the room say good night back. The lamps glow with an even confidence. The counter is dry. The cat has shifted to show one white foot, and then hidden it again. All is as it should be. He draws the door to a smaller opening now. The city outside has thinned to footsteps without owners, and a sky that is not quite black, more like dark velvet rubbed one way and then the other. In a while, the first call to prayer will float over the rooftops in a single quiet thread. Before that, there is still time for the modest contentment of a room at rest. We will linger, and in the next slow stretch we will follow the proprietor into the small storeroom, where sacks breathe, papers wait, and the tools of morning sleep in their right places until a key turns again. The storeroom door opens with a dry whisper. The hinges know the hour and do not ask for oil tonight. Inside, the air is cooler by a hand's width. It smells of sackcloth, roasted beans, rope, and a little seed carried inland by people's coats. A narrow window, high on the wall, shares a square of moon with the floor. Dust moves there like snow and a globe, slow and without hurry. Sacks rest on low wooden skids. Beans fill some, charcoal fills too. The beans wear a color like polished chestnut. One sack is tied with cord and sealed with a clay lump pressed by a merchant's signet. The proprietor checks the tie by touch rather than sight. The knot is firm. He sets 2 fingers on the sack side and listens to the small inward sigh that a full sack gives when pressed. A scale hangs from a beam above. Tea is a simple balance with brass pans and a set of weights in a lidded tin. He lifts the lid. The weights smell faintly of the fingers that have handled them since last autumn: metal, oil, and the soft salt of hands. On a shelf sits a sugar cone wrapped in blue paper. The paper remembers a wet day when it wrinkled and then dried. The cone is kept for guests who prefer a piece dissolved in their cup. Near it, a pair of sugar nips lies neatly, the hinge pinned with a bent nail that has served for years. He squeezes the nips once in the air so the hinge keeps its patience. A small bowl holds the smaller chips. He adds 2 from the cone with care, then folds the paper again and tucks the tail under so that will not loosen. Gentle tightness is a craft. Beside the sugar rests a jar of cloves, and behind that, a paper packet of cinnamon bark. The jar's lid has a habit of refusing to sit straight unless the lip is wiped. He wipes it with the corner of his sleeve, and it agrees to close. Not every container loves a cloth meant for cups only. For this he keeps a second, rougher cloth hanging on a nail. It is mottled with stains in the shapes of continents. The boy stands in the doorway with a reed basket on his hip. He waits, not crowding the room. The storeroom likes few bodies at once. The proprietor points to the smaller sack of charcoal. The boy lifts it, feels the weight, and sets it on a low bench by the brazier's ash jar. Tomorrow morning, the first live coals will come from this sack. Good charcoal sounds like smooth stones when it rests in a bin. He loosens the tie, opens the mouth, and smells a clean, woody dark. The sack settles with a quiet crumble. The proprietor checks the shelf where papers live. There is a ledger bound in leather that has softened at its corners. A reed pen sleeps across the top. He wets the pen with a breath and opens the book to a page that holds today's date in a small hand. He writes 3 lines. 1 for the charcoal to be reordered. 1 for beans to be roasted in the afternoon if the sun is kind to the yard. 1 for sugar to be watched because winter guests use more of it when the air is thin and cold. He dots each mark, then blots the ink with a square of waste paper saved from a merchant's wrapper. Nothing in this room is thrown away while it can still give a second service. On a peg hangs a coil of cotton wick. It came from a rope seller who also twists lamp wicks in the slow season. The proprietor unwinds a span, cuts it into even lengths, and lays the pieces in a row on a shallow tray. He rolls each piece between his palms. The fibers learn alignment from that brief lesson. Wicks that begin their life straight burn without surprise and do not throw soot against clean glass. Teaching, not scolding, he has said it before. A small basket near the door holds tools that drift away unless someone gives them a home each night. The brass trimmer, the tong for lamp wicks, the tiny knife, a brush for the mill, a spoon with a notch in its handle that lets it rest on a pan without falling in. He counts them with his eyes, not out loud. All are present. He smiles again with only the muscles around the eyes. He nudges the basket so its bottom sits square to the flagstone seam. A straight basket makes a straight morning. High on a different shelf stand 2 folded cloths that serve as seat covers when a guest in travel dust asks to sit without dirtying the cushion. He shakes them gently to ask the dust to leave now, not later. The storeroom window breathes out that dust and then goes still. Cloth smells cleaner after it has stood up and thought about itself for a moment. The boy steps back to let the proprietor pass. Together they return to the main room. The lamplight is lower now, but even. The cat has shifted again and has chosen to become a soft rope in a figure 8. The proprietor sets the wick tray on the counter, then pours a little clean water into the saisby to loosen a memory of the day's last brew. He swirls, empties it, and sets the pot mouth down on a folded cloth so any last drop will leave of its own accord. Copper remembers kindness like this and returns it in the smoothness of tomorrow's pour. He opens the drawer where coins sleep. Not many. Just enough to make change without making a guest wait. Copper, a few pieces of bright silver, a token from a porter who sometimes pays in advance with a twist of paper onto small coins. He arranges them by feel, heavy left, light right, the brightest at the back where they smile but do not show off. On the drawer's bottom lies a dried bay leaf. It is a quiet superstition the room learned from a neighbor. A bay leaf invites good temper and discourages moths. Whether true or not, it harms no one and adds a small perfume that no one can name. He glances at the door hook and the bar dot secure. The room keeps its own hand on the latch in the hours when sleep is the honest business of the city. He steps to the fountain jug and tips it slightly. Enough for morning. Still, he prefers to refill it now. Night water settles differently in the jug and gives a better first cup. He takes the jug to the back door. On the way he pauses at the shelf with the backgammon board. He slides the stones into their bag, then ties the cord in a flat knot that will open quickly for the two elder men who always arrive after noon and always argue gently about whether luck or skill bring. Gee's a win. The board closes with a satisfied kiss of wood on wood. Outside, the small courtyard is a pocket of cool. The fig leaf shadows are solid shapes on the wall. He dips the jug at the spout and listens to water lie down. There is a star there in the square of sky a window grants. It sits steady, as if hooked to a nail. He comes in, sets the jug on its stand, and moves in a circle that the room knows by heart. Jug, counter, lamps, cups, door, and back. He lifts the kettle and puts in a palm of water. He sets it on 3 warm stones at the edge of the brazier where heat still remembers its job. He adds a pinch of tea leaves to a small pot. Tea is not the house's master, but it is a kind servant to the people who work here. They will share 1 cup each, sleepy and thin, before they unroll their mats in the rear room. The boy fetches those mats to reeds bound with twine and a pair of rolled blankets. He sets them near the threshold to the back, not too near the door, not too far from the warmth that lingers. He knows these places without thinking, the way feet learn the measure of a step. The kettle sighs. It does not boil, it only remembers how. He pours, waits, pours again. They hold their cups the way men hold birds, gentle but safe. Steam fogs the boy's lashes for a moment and then leaves. They drink. The tea minds its own business. It tastes not of flowers tonight, but of its plain leaf and clean water. Perfect. The proprietor sets his cup down and draws the account book a little closer. He writes 1 last line, small and neat, room ready. He closes the book and lets his fingers rest on the leather. Across the lane, someone coughs. A mule shakes its harness in a yard 2 doors away. Then the city folds back into its quiet self. He dims the lamps further, leaving 1 to keep a low watch by the door. A room sleeps best when at least 1 eye is awake for it. The boy gathers the palm broom and stands it in its corner with the bristles up so they do not learn a bend. He yawns with his mouth closed, out of politeness to the cat and the cups. The proprietor smiles, this time with his mouth, and nods toward the back. They will sleep soon, not long. Just enough. Before first light, the room will want them again. But for a few breaths more, we will linger here, listening as the last coal gives up its small red, and the street gives back a thin thread of wind. In our next unhurried step, we will wake with the room, and watch the first business of morning how fire is asked to live again, how beans take heat, and how the day's first cup is made as if it were a promise. The room wakes before the sky does, not all at once. In small places, heat stirs under the ash, like a sleeper turning to the other side. The cat opens one eye, decides nothing urgent is happening, and lets it fall closed again. The lamps still keep their small watch near the door and the counter. Their wicks are honest lines, trimmed the night before. They behave because they were asked kindly. The proprietor folds his blanket and rolls the reed mat as if it were a scroll. He sets both behind the screen. A washbowl waits on a low stool. He pours a little water, rinses his face, and smooths his beard with the clean palm of a hand. The boy does the same, a step slower, his hair finding its part with the comb's first suggestion. They say little. Morning words will arrive when the mouth remembers them. For now, the clink of the basin and the soft pat of towel on skin are enough. He kneels by the brazier. Last night's charcoal kept a few red hearts under gray ash. He lifts the ash with a brass spoon, sets it aside, and offers 3 small pieces of fresh charcoal to the embers. He breathes once through a reed tube. The glow turns warmer, then leans into flame with a shy blue that becomes comfortable orange. The brazier answers with a low, steady hum. Fire, like any servant, does best with clear, simple tasks. Keep warm. Hold steady, no hurry. The small roasting pan comes down from its peg. It is shallow and dark, with a lid that rattles a little when he shakes it. From the storeroom sack, he measures a handful of green beans into the pan. They look like small stones found in the bed of a stream. He sets the pan on a tripod above the new flame. The lid sits on top, a finger-width askew to let steam escape. He begins to turn the handle. The beans roll and tap each other. At first, the sound is soft and tinny. Soon, a dry crackle answers. Then a more certain crack. The room fills with a scent that is not exactly sweet and not exactly bitter, something that eyes close for without thinking. He lifts the lid and tilts the pan, letting a few beans fall into a shallow wooden tray to cool. Color is watched more than time. The boy fans them with a palm leaf, slow and even, so the roasting will stop where the house prefers it. A shade before dark, not too early, a gloss like chestnuts after rain. In this city, houses learn their roast the way families learn their bread. Guests come because their tongue remembers the shade. When the batch is ready, he spills it into the tray, spreads the beans with the blade of his hand, and lets them talk themselves to quiet. A bean cracks once, then gives up its heat. The boy fits the small hand mill to the counter edge. It is a cylinder with gear teeth that have grown mild with years. He tips the cooled beans into the mill's mouth, places the lid, and turns the handle in a steady circle. The sound is rasp and sigh together. The drawer at the base fills with a powder that is finer than sand and darker than well-polished walnut. He lifts the drawer. The first breath from new-ground coffee is a private greeting. They do not waste it by speaking over it. He taps a line of powder into a small dish and levels it with the back of a spoon. The sazvi stands on the brazier's rim. He pours fresh water from the jug. For the first cup of the house, he measures with more attention than he will give to any later hour. The spoon carries coffee to the pot, a little mound on the surface before it sinks. He adds a pinch of sugar, not much. just enough to take the rough edge from the first swallow. In this room, the morning cup is made orta, neither bitter nor sweet. In many houses then coffee's strength and sweetness were signaled by custom, sade for plain, orta for middling, zekerly for sweet. It lets a cup be a conversation between hand and mouth. He does not stir yet. He sets the pot where the heat is sure but not impatient. A ring of small bubbles appears at the edge. The surface darkens and thickens, the way a pond grows a skin at dusk. He moves the pot a finger's width nearer the heat. Foam rises. He lifts the pot away just before the lip would have spilled. The foam lowers, still intact. He returns the pot to the heat and raises the foam again. Then once more. Lifting 3 times to raise and settle the foam was and in some places remains a common practice. It coaxes a gentle body into the drink and keeps the grounds quiet. He warms 2 cups by rinsing them with the water that sat warm on the brazier's edge. The cups are not large. Porcelain caught from a ship through a merchant's path long ago. Thin, with blue lines that look like the track of swallows. He places each on its saucer, then adds a small glass of water beside one. Water before the coffee wakes the mouth and asks it to pay attention. He pours the coffee in a slow thread, dividing foam carefully so there is a friendly cap for each. They do not drink yet. He carries 1 cup to the door and sets it on the counter ledge near the latch. This is for the first customer if a worker from the docks comes early or if the porter from the lane steps in before sunrise and says the right greeting. The other cup he places on the counter for himself. The boar will wait for the second pot. He is young, and his hands already feel awake. The door bar is lifted and set against the wall. He pulls the door inward on its leather hinge strap and hooks it so the street and room can exchange temperature and breath. The air from outside is fresh and smells faintly of the sea and cold stone. Far away a rooster practices a sentence that he will later say with conviction. The city makes a tiny sound under itself, like a large animal asleep. He moves to the mill and grinds again. The drawer fills. He tips the ground coffee into a jar with a snug lid. He writes the day on a slip and tucks it under the jar. A small thing, but it lets him know which jar is new enough for the afternoon brew and which should serve the morning. He wipes the counter with a damp cloth, straight lines, grain of the wood, not against it. The cloth carries away dust and leaves a path that looks like calm. The first figure appears in the doorway as a shadow that hesitates, then smiles. It is the porter from the lane, the one who pays with tokens tied in paper when his purse feels shy. He touches his hand to his brow and then to his chest. The proprietor returns the gesture with a nod. No hurry to speak. The language is old and does not need repairs. He slides the cup toward the porter. The man does not sit. He stands near the door, warms his fingers around the porcelain, and takes a small sip. He shuts his eyes for a breath, opens them, and looks at the cat as if to say, "You and I are both lucky." He drinks again. A few crumbs of yesterday's biscuit pass across the counter. The proprietor places a new one, not as a bargain but as a habit of care. The porter leaves a copper coin and the paper-wrapped token from 3 days ago. The coin rings softly on the saucer. The token joins the others in the drawer. The boy sets a tray of cups to dry near the open door, where morning air will think kindly of their future. He hangs to clean towels near the basin and folds a third over his forearm, just to remember the weight. The proprietor fills the sazvi again, this time without sugar because he knows the old scholar who walks with a cane prefers it plain. He checks the lamps and invites them down another small step. Delight will soon take their duty. A pair of men with fishermen's caps pass the door, nod, and continue. The street is still half dreaming. The shop smells of coffee, warm copper, and the faint note of last night's clove from the storeroom jar. The reed mat by the threshold lies flat, and the wooden peg under the table holds the boy's extra apron smooth and ready. Ease is the result of many small arrangements. He tastes what is left in his cup. It has cooled to the calm point where bitterness and sweetness have agreed to stop arguing. He sets the cup down and smiles, the kind that moves the jaw and not the teeth. The day is already better than it might have been. Outside, a voice climbs the morning. The call is low, and even a line of sound that does not break. The cat, who does not keep that prayer but respects any line well said, lifts its head and listens until the last word finds its own place. The boy stands still for that moment. The proprietor, too. When the voice rests, they return to their hands. Soon the first guests will come with small talk and larger silences. Some will ask for a game board. Some will read a letter aloud, tracing lines with a finger. Some will want the news that arrived on a dock or a rumor that came up the hill. The room will be itself again quiet, warm, and useful. Before that, there is one more task. The proprietor reaches for the grinder and the jar. He will fill the canister by the stove, stir the ashes, wash the pot, and lay the sugar nibs on their folded cloth. In our next gentle chapter, we will watch the door welcome those first shoes on the mat and follow the simple choreography of cups, spoons, and stories as the morning opens like a paper fan. The first art takes the shape of footsteps. A scholar in a wool cloak arrives with the careful gait of someone who trusts his cane more than the street. He asks for his cup without sugar. The proprietor nods, grinds a touch finer, and lets the sazvi rise and settle 3 patient times. The scholar warms his hands on the porcelain, sips, and opens a folded paper. He reads in a whisper that is not meant for anyone, not even himself, just a way to invite the words into the room. When the cup is empty, he turns it over on its saucer, lets it rest, then lifts it to look at the pattern left by the grounds. It is not a prediction here, only a private glance at the shape of a day. Reading shapes in the dregs was, and is, a pastime in some homes. In public rooms like this one, it can be a quiet joke shared with no one. A boatman from the Golden Horn sits near the door and yawns into his sleeve. He asks for sweet, and the boy brings a cup with a generous cap of foam. The boatman takes a bite from a sugar nip for later and wraps the rest in paper. He listens to the scholar's whisper and pretends not to. A porter comes back with a cart story shortened to 3 lines and to hand gestures. The proprietor laughs gently and answers with a sound that means, yes, that is how it goes. At the counter, the hand mule speaks in a slow rasp. The boy empties the drawer, taps the powder with a wooden stick, and slides it into a jar with a snug lid. He wipes the counter with the damp cloth, always along the grain. He moves like someone who has been told once that a day is a row of small stitches. If one is neat, The next wants to match it. The cat, now satisfied with morning, relocates to a patch of sun that has found the threshold. It will stay there until the light learns another place to lie down. A calligrapher visits with inky fingers and sleeves rolled just enough. He does not drink until he has washed his hands. The basin's water goes cloudy and then clears when he empties and refills it. He sets a reed pen to dry on the window ledge, orders his coffee shade, and sits with his back to the wall. He stares at the cup as if a line might come out of it. When the proprietor glances over, the calligrapher holds up the cup with 2 fingers and nods, an approval better than most coins. The room is a collection of soft sounds. Dice bump the felt of a backgammon board. A stringed instrument passes by in the lane, playing 4 notes and a small answer. A news sheet hand-copied changes hands near the counter. Voices in this room rarely climb. They prefer to walk. On a low shelf, the ledger waits with its twine tie. When a pause arrives, the proprietor empties it, turns to a fresh page, and makes tidy marks. Beans from yesterday, charcoal from last week, cups broken this spring too. A gift from clumsy rain, and a small column of tokens to redeem. The boy brings a small plate of coins from the drawer. Copper, a little silver, and 1 foreign piece with a hole in the center. The foreign coin stays in the dish. It will pay for nothing but will remind a guest of a story about a ship. Between cups, the boy steps to the well in the courtyard with 2 ewers. He lowers the bucket, hears the rope whisper against stone, and lifts water that smells faintly of clean earth. He carries it in both arms, not because it is heavy, but because it deserves 2 hands. The proprietor boils a finger of water in the sazvi, pours it out, and wipes the lip. The pot shines in the manner of copper that has learned a family. Late morning brings a peddler of cardamom. He leaves a small paper cone of seeds, accepts a cup of coffee, and gives, in return, 3 stories of distant stalls, each ending with the same sentence. And everyone was satisfied. A barber arrives, touches the back of a chair the way one greets a friend, and nods toward the brazier. He likes to warm his hands before work. The proprietor lifts the grate to spread the coals, then settles it again. Embers glow like pomegranate seeds under thin ash. A quiet aside. In these years, coffeehouses served more than drink. Poems found tongues. News crossed districts. Boards and counters lent their surfaces to games and letters. Now and then officials worried that cups could carry ideas too easily. Sometimes they asked rooms like this to close for a while. Most rooms reopened. The habit of sitting together with a small cup and a larger silence had roots that enjoyed soa. A man with a parcel asks to leave it for a half hour. The proprietor nods and sets it behind the screen, not because he trusts parcels, he trusts the man's face. The boy sweeps the floor with a palm broom and arcs that leave small waves. The dustpan, woven reed, and thin cane collects the day's first thin layer. He tips it into the bin near the door and fits the pan back into its hook. Near midday, a short pause settles over the room. Heat begins to soften the edge of the street. Some guests leave to eat. The proprietor prepares a fresh pot for a group of workers who return with bread wrapped in cloth. They place a slice on a saucer and dip it into the foam, not to be proper, but because their mouths prefer it so. The boy lays a little plate of salted olives between them. One of the workers pinches a pit between forefinger and thumb and sets it on the saucer's rim, exactly opposite the handle. The pattern pleases him. He does not know why, and this ignorance is pleasant. Afternoon arrives like a shawl. The light thins and grows kind. The proprietor opens the door wider to invite a breeze. He hangs a wet cloth on the peg near the counter so air passing through the weave cools itself. The calligrapher stands, thanks the room with a bow that includes furniture, and takes back his reed pen. He leaves a coin and a word, clear, a compliment to a cup and to a day. In the late hour a storyteller appears, not to perform, just to count his coins and check his shoes before a night's work somewhere else. He asked for strong coffee and receives it. He drinks it in 3 swallows and watches his own hands the way a mason watches the surface of drying lime. He leaves behind to laughter lines without making a sound. Evening thinks about arriving. The proprietor tastes a little brew from the pot and decides the beans can rest. He lets the fire shrink to a memory. The boy washes cups with warm water, sets them upside down on a cloth, and counts them without speaking numbers. The proprietor lifts each lamp in turn, pinches the wick with brass tongs, and lowers the flame to a thread that cannot be bothered to flicker. He checks the latch on the storeroom, touches the lip of the water ewer, and lays a clean towel over the grinder. They sweep one last time. The cat, who has slept in 3 patches of light and 1 of shade, rises and makes a circle around the boy's legs before settling again, this time near the warm brick of the oven wall. The proprietor ties the ledger with twine, places it under the counter, and rests his palm on the wood for the length of 1 breath. This is not a ritual he learned from a teacher. It is a way of telling the room thank you without a word. He lifts the door from its hook and lets it lean into the frame. The hinge strap breathes once. The latch settles. Outside, a final pair of footsteps pauses and fades. Inside, the air smells of copper coffee and the clean paper of an empty page. The room does not go to sleep. It returns to a quiet from which it can be woken again easily. Night gathers its edges. The street becomes a line drawn with a soft brush. The boy blows lightly across the brazier. The last coal answers with a red eye, then closes it. The proprietor looks once around, not to check, but to enjoy. He nods to the cat, to the shelf, to the counter, to the door. The city breathes. The house of cups breathes with it. Now these stories will keep you company as you rest. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams.